Chapter 208. Nice to meet you, welcome to the team. Bojan extended his hand to welcome Yunjian. Yunjian nodded slightly, not intending to shake his hand. Bojan did not feel awkward and changed the topic. The rest of the team will be exploring the area around the tomb tomorrow. They'll be back soon. Not long after he said that, a group of 5 to 6 people appeared in front of them. Bojan pointed at Yunjian and introduced her to them. You guys are back. This is Yunjian, she's our new partner. She'll be going into the tomb with us tomorrow. Oh my god. She's going into the tomb? Before Bojan could finish, he was interrupted by a woman who was dressed up to the nines. The woman looked surprised. She looked at Yunjian from head to toe a few times before sighing to Yunjian. Little girl, are you 18 years old this year? The woman made a tsk sound as she spoke. Yunjian glanced at the woman and ignored her. The woman stood out among the group of men. After all, she was the only woman in the group who was going into the tomb. The woman's name was Yi Yenting. It was a nice name, and her facial features were not bad. However, she looked unnatural because of the pink and green foundation and eyeliner on her face. More importantly, Yi Yenting's body had a strong pungent perfume smell, which made it hard for people to like her. Plus, her tone of voice was even more repulsive. It was just that Yi Yenting did not think that way. When she saw Yunjian ignoring her, she was infuriated. It was because Yunjian was the only girl in the group. So Yi Yenting wanted to find a temporary friend who would not make her look like she was walking alone. That was why she talked to Yunjian. She did not expect Yunjian to be so disrespectful. Yi Yenting was not a pushover either. She immediately muttered to Yunjian in front of everyone. TSK, who do you think you are? Why do you insist on following us when you're so arrogant and powerful? If you have the guts, go to the tomb by yourself. Yi Yenting was a typical, if you don't obey me, I won't let you have an easy time kind of person. However, her words did not provoke Yunjian in the slightest. Yi Yenting, can't you behave yourself? A handsome 27 or 28 years old man, standing next to Yi Yenting, growled at her in a low voice. Then, the man looked at Yunjian apologetically and said, Little girl, I apologize on her behalf. Please don't mind what she said. Ling Tianhao, how dare you scold me for someone else? I didn't do anything wrong. Yi Yenting saw the man apologize to Yunjian. Her face changed and she couldn't help shouting. The man called Ling Tianhao frowned. His disgust for Yi Yenting disappeared in a flash. Other than Yunjian, everyone present knew that Yi Yenting and Ling Tianhao were a couple. However, what they did not know was that Yi Yenting's love for Ling Tianhao was one-sided. The reason why Ling Tianhao agreed to be with Yi Yenting was that he and Yi Yenting's brother were both soldiers. They were good friends and comrades in arms. Once they were on a mission together. Yi Yenting's brother sacrificed himself to save Ling Tianhao. At the same time, he entrusted his sister, Yi Yenting, to Ling Tianhao. Ling Tianhao could not bear to refuse, so he stayed with Yi Yenting for 3 years. In these 3 years, he did not develop any feelings for Yi Yenting. Instead, he hated her more and more. Chapter 209. Yunjian glanced at Ling Tianhao and Yi Yenting. She could guess their relationship. She ignored Yi Yenting's aggressive words and replied to Ling Tianhao, I don't care about the howling of a mad dog. She didn't come here to quarrel with them, so she didn't care about Yi Yenting's behavior. Yi Yenting was even angrier. She pointed at Yunjian and was about to walk over. She rolled up her sleeves and pretended to fight. You called me a dog? How dare you call me a dog? You. Enough. Yi Yenting, do you still want to go to the tomb with us? If you say one more word, you can go home. Ling Tianhao yelled at Yi Yenting in the next second. At the same time, Ling Tianhao forcefully dragged Yi Yenting away to prevent the conflict from escalating. The rest of the people looked at each other. They were all dissatisfied with Yi Yenting. After Ling Tianhao dragged Yi Yenting away, Yunjian got to know the rest of them as well. She also knew that they were with Ling Tianhao. Actually, we are special forces. The man who just went over there is also one of our teammates. His name is Ling Tianhao. He was ordered to go into the tomb to investigate the situation. The man in the military posture smiled bitterly as he spoke. The man who looked like a soldier was called Sun Jinxiong. Sun Jinxiong waved his hand with a bitter smile. He waved his hand in the direction where Ling Tianhao and Yi Yenting were walking. Then he sighed and said, "Sigh, Tianhao is such a good person. How could he be involved in such a thing? When old Yi left, he shouldn't have entrusted his sister to." Sun Jinxiong sighed. At this moment, a tall and sturdy man elbowed him in the stomach and interrupted him. "Old Sun, don't talk so much. Be careful that Yi Yenting doesn't hear you. She'll make a scene again." Fine, fine, fine. It's useless to say more. I won't talk anymore." Sun Jinxiong smiled awkwardly and turned to ask Yun Jian, "Oh right, little girl. Why do you want to go to the tomb? You can't enter the tomb unless you have no other choice. It's very dangerous inside." Sun Jinxiong had good intentions, but Yun Jian smiled and interrupted him. She said, "My name is Yun Jian. I have a reason why I have to enter." Since Yun Jian said so, they didn't ask anything more. Yun Jian had also figured out the situation of this group of people. Bo Zhan and Fu Xian were together. They were both members of the Flying Dragon archaeological team and friends of Yu Bufan. The two of them heard that the tomb was dangerous, so they gathered people to go down the tomb with them. That was how they met Ling Tianhao, Sun Jinxiong and the others. Other than Yi Yenting, who was forced to come along, Ling Tianhao and the others were members of a special force from Z country. They were going into the tomb to carry out their mission. Yun Jian knew that there were many special forces in country Z, but not many of them could be classified as advanced special forces. As for whether they were related to Gujunjian, there was nothing to say. Yi Yenting and Ling Tianhao came back when the sky was dark. She didn't know how Ling Tianhao comforted Yi Yenting, but both of them had calmed down by the time they came back. They set up a tent for Yun Jian, and then went to pack their things. These things were naturally necessary for the trip to the tomb the next day. Yun Jian also took out the things in her backpack and counted them. "Hey look, there's another car coming." At this moment, a tall and large off-road vehicle drove over in an overbearing manner, flashing past in front of everyone. There was a huge unique skull on the front of the SUV, which attracted everyone's attention. The one who spoke was Sun Jinxiong. Bo Zhan's eyes widened as he watched the off-road vehicle drive past. He was currently pointing at the SUV's tracks and exclaiming softly, Isn't that Gu Sha mercenary's car? I can't be wrong about the symbol on the car. No one would dare to imitate that symbol." As soon as he said this, everyone was horrified. Chapter 210. Kosha Mercenaries. It was the international mercenary organization that was famous all over the world. Ling Tianhao, Sun Jinxiong, and the rest's expressions changed upon hearing Bo Zhan's words. Yun Jian raised her eyebrows slightly. Of course, she saw the logo on the car. It was undoubtedly Kosha Mercenaries. However, it was too dark for her to see clearly who was in the car. "What Kosha Mercenaries?" Yi Yenting raised her eyebrows in disdain and asked. "It's just a small organization. Look at how scared you are. It's not like we're in a sci-fi movie." Yi Yenting mumbled. Yi Yenting was a typical lady who was raised in her boudoir. Naturally, she had never heard of international assassin organizations. That was why she scoffed when she saw the terrified expression on everyone's faces when they heard about Kosha Mercenaries. Sun Jinxiong and the rest almost slapped Yi Yenting when they heard what she said. It would be fine if Yi Yenting said that to them. If she said that in front of Kosha Mercenaries, not only would she die, but all of them would die with her. Yi Yenting, shut up. It was the first time Sun Jinxiong yelled at Yi Yenting, who had nothing to do with him. "Kosha Mercenaries. We can't afford to offend them. Yi Yenting, you better restrain yourself. Otherwise, you don't have to come with us." Even the usually calm Fu Xian threatened Yi Yenting. With that, no one gave Yi Yenting an explanation. However, Yi Yenting really shut her mouth after hearing what everyone said. She was really afraid that Bo Zhan and Fu Xian would refuse to bring her along. Even if Ling Tianhao wanted to bring her along, there was nothing he could do. However, Yi Yenting did not stop there. She could not help but grit her teeth in grievance. What Kosha Mercenaries? How could they be so powerful? Haha, she did not believe it. "Everyone pack up and rest early. We'll enter the tomb tomorrow morning," Bo Zhan said with a frown. After everyone heard this, they immediately dispersed. Yun Jian, on the other hand, only slightly hid her lip gloss. She didn't know who from the Kosha mercenaries was sitting in the off-road vehicle. Perhaps he would be able to meet them after entering the tomb. Therefore, Yun Jian went back to the tent after checking the things in the bag. He had a dreamless night. The next day, at 4 or 5 o'clock, autumn turned to winter. The sun had not risen yet, and the sky was pitch black. Yun Jian turned over and got out of bed. By the time Bo Zhan and the rest woke up, Yun Jian was already done with her morning training and had put on all her equipment. "Let's gather and depart," Bo Zhan said once everyone was awake. Bo Zhan then bade farewell to Yu Bufan and the rest, and the group headed towards the ancient tomb. Yun Jian walked at the back of the group. She had been observing the surroundings along the way. When they arrived at the entrance of the tomb, it was already 8:30 in the morning. What appeared in front of them was a dried-up well. When the ancient tomb was excavated, it was found in a dried-up well. Therefore, there was only one way to enter the tomb, and that was to go down this deep dried-up well. "Who's going first?" Bo Zhan asked after tying the rope. "Yi Yenting, since you're so good, why don't you go first?" Sun Jinxiong suggested as he saw that Yi Yenting was unhappy. Aye. Yi Yenting shuddered violently. She looked at the dried-up well fearfully and took 2 steps back. Of course, she would not be the first to enter the tomb. Suddenly, she had an idea and pointed at Yun Jian. "You're the last to join us. Of course you should go first." The first person to enter the tomb might accidentally trigger the mechanism, so Yi Yenting would rather die than be the first to enter. "I'll go first," Bo Zhan said. "I'll go first." Yun Jian's eyes flickered. She walked over and pulled the rope. Without any hesitation, she stood in front of the dried-up well and jumped in swiftly. Everyone was stunned as well. After all, the warning that no one who enters the tomb will survive was still there. Who could guarantee that those who entered the tomb would not be killed on the spot by the mechanism? Chapter 211. Although that was what everyone thought, after Yun Jian, Bo Zhan led them into the tomb one by one. Yi Yenting was pushed into the well by Ling Tianhao. She wanted to give up when she saw how deep the well was. However, Ling Tianhao pulled her down mercilessly, and she followed suit. At the same time, Yun Jian turned on the flashlight as she was the first to enter the tomb. She looked around and found that there was a secret passage at the bottom of the well. She raised her head and looked at the top of the well, but all she saw was darkness. Even the sun couldn't shine through. She could not even see Bo Zhan and the rest who were standing outside the well, let alone hear their voices. It was very strange. However, Yun Jian did not have to wait long before Bo Zhan and the rest came down one by one. "How is it? Is there a way out?" Bo Zhan asked Yun Jian after he came down. At the same time, he was fiddling with the communicator in his hand. The signal was full. "There's only one way." Yun Jian pointed at the only passage in front of them and said, "They're all down. Let's go then." Bo Zhan turned on the flashlight he had prepared and let Yun Jian keep hers while he led the way. Yun Jian did not intend to stand out. She turned off the flashlight and followed behind Bo Zhan. Are we really leaving? This place is so dark, and it's so narrow and small." Yi Yenting swallowed her saliva in fear and looked around cautiously. "Now you know how to be afraid. You insisted on following us and said you were not afraid of anything. Now you know how to be afraid. It's too late." Sun Jinxiong could not stand it and rebuked Yi Yenting. "All right, stop talking. Let's keep up." Ling Tianhao mediated in time. He did not wait for Yi Yenting and followed the group. Yi Yenting saw that Ling Tianhao had left and quickly followed. The secret passage was very narrow and small. It was only enough for one person to walk through with a bent back. It was difficult for people who were too big to walk. Although Fu Exine was fat, it was not to the point where it was strenuous for him. "Stay close." Bo Zhan took the lead and instructed the people behind him as he heard the sound of wind blowing. The ground was covered with a thick layer of mud. Along the way, there were many footprints on the mud. Obviously, there were many people who had entered the tomb, but none of the footprints led to the outside. After walking for about 10 minutes, Yun Jian found that the deeper they went, the wider the narrow secret passage became. In the end, not only were they able to stand up straight, They could even feel the vastness in their arms. Wait, there's no way out. At the end of the journey, Bojan realized that he was surrounded by walls made of mud and rocks. There was no longer a path to continue moving forward. What? Wasn't this the only entrance? How could there be no road just like that? Did you guys go the wrong way? You're leading the way. Yi Yunting shouted in surprise. There's a trap. Bojan frowned and turned to look at his assistant Fu Xian. Old Xian, help me find the trap. As he spoke, Bojan took out a bunch of tools from his backpack. Bojan and Fu Xian were experts in tomb raiding, so they were experts in finding traps. Ling Tianhao, Sun Jinxiong and the rest naturally did not know this, so they just stood there and waited. Before Bojan could take out the tools from his backpack, a young girl's melodious voice was heard. You don't have to look for it. Yun Jian then walked to a corner in front and continued. The trap is here. You know where it is. He don't mess around, alright. Who do you think you are? You're so awesome. Yi Yunting already had a lot of opinions about Yun Jian. Now, it was as if she had caught Yun Jian's weakness. She started babbling. Boom! At the same time, Yun Jian had arrived at the corner. She brushed away some of the mud on the ground, revealing a small trap. Chapter 212. The mechanism was activated, and the passageway appeared. Yi Yunting's mouth, which had been scolding Yun Jian, fell silent in an instant. Her actions just now were like a clown jumping ship. It was hilarious and ridiculous. Yun Jian, how did you know there was a mechanism here? Bojan was the first to ask Yun Jian. There was still a trace of surprise and astonishment on his face. The soil here shows signs of loosening. Someone must have opened the mechanism before us. It's not hard to find it. Yun Jian explained and used the soil to cover the mechanism. If someone had opened the mechanism before, why did you cover it up? Also, why did you cover it up too? Ling Tianhao asked, puzzled. Those who came here naturally didn't want anyone to enter the tomb before them and fight with them for the treasures in the tomb. Yun Jian grinned, revealing a row of white teeth. She smiled gently and explained, me too. Actually, that was not the reason why she covered the mechanism up. Bojan and Fu Xian were both expert grave robbers and experts in studying all kinds of mechanisms in tombs. Although both of them heard Yun Jian's answer, they were still secretly shocked. The mechanisms in the tomb were all interconnected. If the person who entered the tomb covered the switches, there must be a reason for it. The least they could do was to avoid triggering any dangerous traps. Both of them were not surprised by Yun Jian's clever explanation. They looked at Yun Jian a few more times. This 15-year-old girl, whom they thought was the weakest in the group, was not simple at all. Cough cough. Let's go down. Bojan held the torchlight and went down first. Yun Jian followed him again. Then the group continued walking. Boom! The strange thing was, when Yi Yunting was the last one to go down the tunnel, the mechanism behind her closed up automatically. Ah! The mechanism closed up on its own. How can this be? It closed up on its own. How are we going to get out? Is this place really like what the rumors say? It's only entry and not exit. What should we do? Are we going to die here? Yi Yunting was so frightened that she screamed. Her whole body was trembling, and her voice was getting shriller and more terrified. Shut up. If you scream again, I'll kill you first. Yun Jian suddenly turned her head and glared at Yi Yunting from the spacious staircase. Yi Yunting felt a chill run down her spine, and she didn't dare to make a sound in the pitch-black underground tunnel. Yun Jian suddenly became fierce because she heard voices coming from an open space at the bottom of the stairs. That's right, it was a human voice. That was why she had fiercely ordered Yi Yunting to shut up. What's wrong? Did you find anything? Bojan turned to look at Yun Jian and asked. Bojan no longer treated Yun Jian as a child after she had discovered the mechanism at first glance. Although the mechanism was eye-catching, even Bojan, a famous tomb raider, could not spot it at first glance. It was obvious that Yun Jian was not an ordinary person. There's someone downstairs, Yun Jian said with her eyes downcast. She then walked past Bojan and hurried down the stairs. Is he down there? There's someone down there? How come we didn't hear anything? Sun Jinxiong was stunned. That's because your ears aren't working well, the burly man next door replied to Sun Jianxiong with a smile. The group continued to walk down until they reached an open space. Who would have thought that at the bottom of the dry well, after the mechanism was activated, there would be a secret passage leading downwards. After going down the stairs, there was an open space that was as big as a quarter of a basketball court. At this moment, there were two groups of people gathered here. Yun Jian did not find the person she was looking for when she fixed her gaze on them. Chapter 213. Yun Jian was visibly disappointed. It was within her expectations to see these people with skull markings on their arms. They were from the Kosha mercenaries, the same group that drove the off-road vehicle last night. Yun Jian glanced at them and did not recognize them. This was normal. Yun Jian was the boss of the Kosha mercenaries. Other than Snake, Lizard Tiger, Leopard, and some high-ranking members of the Kosha mercenaries, she did not know any of the other members in her past life. Just like Su Zetian, he was the mafia boss of Longmen City, and his status in Longmen City was unquestionable. However, he might not even be ranked in the Kosha mercenaries, let alone be recognized by Yun Jian. It was a fact that these people were from the Kosha mercenaries with the skull markings on their arms. However, it was certain that they were not high-ranking members. As for the other group of people, they were all burly men in their prime. Their identities and origins were unknown. In contrast to Yun Jian, the other group of people, as well as Bo Zhan and the rest, paled when they saw the Kosha mercenaries with skull markings on their arms. They had actually bumped into the Kosha mercenaries. Tisk tsk. How lively. At this moment, the man standing at the front with the skull imprint on his arm laughed twice, and his sharp eyes turned fierce. This man was a member of the Kosha mercenaries codenamed Bear. Might. Every member of the Kosha mercenaries had their own code names, and did not reveal their real names. Bear. Might was not a high-ranking member of the Kosha mercenaries, nor was he on the top of the list. However, he could still be ranked in the top 99 of the Kosha mercenaries. This was enough for him to be arrogant in the underworld. Every member of the Kosha mercenaries would be ranked according to their ability. Usually, the top 20 would be occupied by the high-ranking members, while the top 50 would be the super elites of the Kosha mercenaries. Those who could be ranked in the top 100 of the Kosha mercenaries could already be arrogant in the underworld. Even someone like Su Zetian could only be ranked in the tens of thousands of the Kosha mercenaries. One could only imagine Bear Might's status. As long as he did not encounter any terrifying characters, it was enough for him to show off. Where are you guys from? Bear Might swept his gaze across the crowd, his murderous aura making everyone lower their heads as they trembled in fear. Even Bo Zhan and Fu Xian had to soften their stance under Bear Might's oppression. But at this moment, Yi Yenting's desperate voice sounded again. They're from the Kosha mercenaries. I think they're no big deal. They're all humans with a pair of eyes, a nose and a mouth. Yi Yenting had been suppressing her anger, and had nowhere to vent it. Seeing how everyone was so fearful of this Gusha mercenaries man, she had forgotten all about Sun Jianxiong, Fu Xian, and the rest's warning to her. In order to stand out and be the center of attention, Yi Yenting spoke up. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and stood at the side in silence. Bear Might's cheerful expression darkened instantly after he heard Yi Yenting's belittling. Although he was arrogant, he could not bear to see others bad-mouthing the Kosha mercenaries. He immediately took out a Browning pistol from his pocket and pointed it at Yi Yenting, roaring, F***CKU. How dare you insult the dignity of the Kosha mercenaries? Bo Zhan and the rest gasped at the sight of Bear Might taking out his pistol in a fit of rage. Everyone was cursing Yi Yenting for being blind, and regretting agreeing to let such a foolish woman like Yi Yenting join them. Yi Yenting was so frightened that she knelt on the ground. When she saw the shiny pistol in Bear Might's hand, she was so scared that she was on the verge of collapsing. She finally understood that the few words she had casually said had brought disaster upon herself. Gun. Yi Yenting's expression changed, and she stepped back. How dare you insult the Kosha mercenaries? I'll send you all to hell with this bitch. Bear Might reloaded the gun domineeringly and glared at Yun Jian. Bojan, Fu Exan, Ling Tianhao and the rest. If Yi Yenting said something wrong, it would implicate everyone else. This was the reason why everyone was afraid of offending the kosher mercenaries. Chapter 214. Just when everyone was frightened by the scene in front of them, and thought that they were all going to die because of that Yi Yenting, a gentle voice came from behind them. A light female voice was heard. It's up to you whether you want to kill Yi Yenting or not. But don't even think about touching the others. Yunjian looked at Bear Might and stared straight at him. She was not intimidated by his aura at all. Bojan and the rest were indeed no match for Bear Might. Bear Might was also an assassin, although he was not ranked on the international assassin chart. However, in front of Bojan and the rest, to be honest, killing them was like squashing a bunch of ants. This was the strength of the kosher mercenaries. A member of the kosher mercenaries could fight against 100 people at once. Yunjian, how dare you ask him to kill me? How can you be so vicious? Do you have a conscience? If we didn't bring you in, you probably wouldn't even be able to enter this place. And now you're abandoning me. Yi Yenting was really scared when she heard that, and started to curse at Yunjian. She did not even think about how she had failed to bully Yunjian, and forced her to do so. And who are you? Bear Might ignored Yi Yenting's words and looked straight at Yunjian. His instincts told him that this girl was not simple. Even Bojan and the rest of the men would sweat and tremble in fear when they saw their guns pointed at them. Yunjian was not moved at all. On the contrary, she stood out to vouch for the rest. Bear Might was arrogant, but he always remembered that he was a member of the kosher mercenaries. How could Bear Might, who was able to squeeze into the top 100 of the kosher mercenaries, be a decisive person who would kill without knowing the background of the other party? If that was the case, he would not have survived until now. We are not enemies. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and looked at Bear Might from the side and replied. After saying that, she turned around and walked towards Yi Yenting under everyone's gazes. What are you doing? Yi Yenting took 2 steps back, looking at Yunjian who was walking toward her with a menacing aura. Yi Yenting retreated step by step until she reached a corner and could no longer retreat. Has anyone ever told you that you can't afford to offend the kosher mercenaries? Yunjian gave a sinister smile. It was extremely creepy. Yi Yenting backed away in fear, shaking her head as she looked at the shiny gun in Bear Might's hand and cried out fearfully. I'm wrong, I'm really wrong. Yunjian, plead for mercy for me. Save me, I can't die. Yi Yenting thought that Yunjian was planning to sacrifice herself to protect herself and the others. Of course. It was only at this moment that Yi Yenting reacted. Any member of Gusha mercenaries could pull out a pistol and kill anyone they wanted. This organization was definitely not the small one she had mentioned earlier. Save you? The dignity of the kosher mercenaries is not something you can slander. Yunjian curled her lips. She looked at the frightened Yi Yenting and narrowed her eyes. The kosher mercenaries? Could it be that Yunjian was a member of the kosher mercenaries? After hearing Yunjian's words, everyone widened their eyes and stared at her in shock. She was actually a member of the kosher mercenaries. How old was she? Even Bear Might and the others were completely dumbfounded. Yunjian looked at Bear Might and said, how do you deal with outsiders slandering the kosher mercenaries? It was an absolute order. Yunjian was born with the aura of a king. Even Xiong Wei, who was aggressive just now, did not know about Yunjian's identity and status, and was willing to yield. Chapter 215. Anyone who slandered the kosher mercenaries will be killed without mercy. Yunjian repeated. She stared at Yi Yenting with a murderous look in her eyes. She was the one who set this rule. So why don't you do it? Yunjian turned her head and ordered Bear Might. Bear Might and his men were completely stunned on the spot. Logically speaking, Yunjian and Yi Yenting were on the same side. Now that Yi Yenting had slandered the kosher mercenaries, this little girl not only claimed to be a member of the kosher mercenaries, but also asked him to kill Yi Yenting who had entered the tomb with her. Yi Yenting was completely shocked. She did not expect Yunjian to be a member of the kosher mercenaries. In spite of it, Yi Yenting did not forget to ask for help. Seeing that Yun Jian's pleas were futile, she scrambled to Ling Tianhao and tugged at his pants, wailing, "Tianhao, save me, save me. They have guns, they're going to kill me. I don't have a brother anymore. You said you would protect me." Yi Yenting's brother had died to save Ling Tianhao. Before he died, he asked Ling Tianhao to take care of his sister. Yi Yenting had been holding Ling Tianhao's weakness against him. At this moment, Ling Tianhao did not even look at her. Of all the people you could have messed with, you had to mess with the kosher mercenaries. The kosher mercenaries is the #1 assassin organization in the world. Do you still want to live after provoking it? Sun Jinxiong roared at Yi Yenting in disappointment. He really did not like Yi Yenting. If old Yi, who had sacrificed himself to save Ling Tianhao, was not Yi Yenting's brother, Ling Tianhao and Sun Jinxiong would not even look at Yi Yenting. The #1 assassin organization. The kosher mercenaries was actually an assassin organization. Hearing the words assassin organization, Yi Yenting's entire body was paralyzed. Who could tell her that these assassins and organizations that she had only seen in movies actually existed? More importantly, she had actually provoked this power. On the other side, Bear might heard Yun Jian's words, but he didn't move. He looked at Yun Jian and no longer looked at her with hostility. Instead, he asked in a probing tone, "May I know your code name in the organization?" In the kosher mercenaries, there had always been an unwritten rule. A person's code name represented that person. At the same time, the higher the ranking, the higher the position in the kosher mercenaries. The meaning behind Bear Might's question was obvious. If Yun Jian's status was higher than his, then he would definitely be respectful to Yun Jian. However, if Yun Jian's position in the kosher mercenaries was lower than his, then Bear Might would not listen to Yun Jian. Just as Bo Zhan and the rest were slowly accepting Yun Jian's identity, the frivolous conversation between Yun Jian and Bear Might was heard again. "You don't deserve to know." Yun Jian looked at Xiong Wei and crossed her arms. Indeed, he didn't deserve to know. Yun Jian was the boss of the kosher mercenaries. Even the super elites in the top 20 to 50 were not qualified to meet her. Moreover, Bear Might was just a small fry in the top 100. F***ck, this little girl is so arrogant. Bro, you probably weren't even born when we joined the kosher mercenaries. A man standing beside Bear Might could no longer hold it in and was about to punch Yun Jian. However, he was stopped by Bear Might. Bear Might was quite observant. After all, being in the top 100 was already considered impressive. Yun Jian admired Bear Might's ability to hold it in. She pursed her red lips and smiled at Bear Might and his group. Then her gaze fell on Bear Might. You're Lizard's subordinate, right? Snake. Lizard's position in the kosher mercenaries was obvious. Yun Jian actually called her Lizard. Could it be that this little girl's status was higher than Snake? Lizards. Then she was. Chapter 216. Yun Jian saw Xiong Wei's expression change. She stopped smiling and looked at Xiong Wei. "You don't have to guess my identity. You just need to tell me whether you work for Lizard or not." Being exposed, Bear Might stopped hesitating and nodded respectfully. "That's right. I'm Lord Snake, Lizard's subordinate." Although Xiong Wei worked for Snake Lizard, he was only one of Snake Lizard's subordinates. He rarely interacted with Snake Lizard. Naturally, he was not as important as the raccoon who gave Yun Jian a sports car. "Okay." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and nodded. "I'm done. You can continue what you were doing." Yun Jian told Bear Might as she stepped aside to reveal Yi Yenting, who was trembling in fear in the corner. She was reminding Xiong Wei not to forget to kill Yi Yenting, who dared to slander kosher mercenaries. Okay. Xiong Wei and the others had already submitted to Yun Jian. Xiong Wei pulled the trigger of the Browning and pointed the gun at Yi Yenting. "Ah!" Yi Yenting covered her eyes and kept saying, don't kill me, I'm wrong, no? Wait!" Ling Tianhao could not bear to see the sister of his comrade die in front of him. This was his promise to his comrade. Ling Tianhao was a smart man. After watching what happened, he knew that the decision of whether Yi Yenting could live or not was in the hands of Yun Jian. who they had underestimated from the beginning. Ling Tianhao looked at Yun Jian and begged, "Sister Yun Jian, can you let her go for my sake?" Ling Tianhao was told by Yi Yenting's brother to take care of her. He did not want to break his promise. Otherwise, even if Yi Yenting died in front of him 1,000 times, he would not even blink. Oh. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and raised her eyebrows at Ling Tianhao. After knowing the relationship between Ling Tianhao and Yi Yenting, it was not surprising that Ling Tianhao would beg him to spare Yi Yenting. Xiong Wei's hand that was about to pull the trigger paused when Yun Jian responded to Ling Tianhao. "Why should I let her go for your sake? Who are you to me?" Yun Jian's next words made Ling Tianhao and the others' eyelids twitch. The kosher mercenaries had never let anyone go for the sake of a certain someone. But that's fine. It's troublesome to dispose of the corpse after killing someone here, Yun Jian muttered to herself. Then she looked at Bear Might and said to him, "Do as you see fit. Let her live." However, for someone who slandered the kosher mercenaries, she can be spared from death, but she must be punished. Yun Jian's command actually made Xiong Wei want to obey absolutely. He nodded and answered, "Yes. Let's continue." Yun Jian narrowed her eyes again and smiled like an ordinary girl, bright and youthful. However, when the others thought of how she did not care about Yi Yenting's life, they felt their hair stand on end. How did Bear Might deal with Yi Yenting? He dislocated Yi Yenting's arms and legs on the spot. Yi Yenting cried out in pain and then fainted, but no one cared about her. At least she kept her life. That was already very lucky. There's no road ahead. We've been searching here for a long time. After Bear Might finished dealing with Yi Yenting, he walked over to Yun Jian and said respectfully. He thought he could guess Yun Jian's identity. Apart from that person, who else could have such a kingly aura? Chapter 217. There's no road ahead? Yun Jian pursed her lips. She looked around and smirked. She had already realized that they were surrounded by mud walls, and there was no way out. It was a dead end. Even the exit above has been sealed, Bear Might explained once again. As he spoke, Bear Might explained in more detail. Only when someone from the outside comes in will the exit be opened. However, it will quickly merge back together. Otherwise, we will be trapped here until we die. If Yi Yenting had not fainted at this time, she would have been scared to the point of screaming after hearing this. But she probably did not even have the strength to stand up now. Since there's no way out, we'll blow one up. Yun Jian smirked. She turned her head and looked at Bear Might's bulging backpack. "Is there a bomb?" Bo Zhan and the rest were dumbfounded when Yun Jian asked Bear Might such a strange question. They were here to rob a tomb. Who would bring a bomb to rob a tomb? But they did not know the members of the kosher mercenaries. Any member of the kosher mercenaries would carry a huge backpack when they were out on a mission or venturing into a dangerous place. There must be a bomb in the backpack. But the bomb's power was moderate. It wasn't the kind of dangerous bomb that would kill everyone around it if it was thrown. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Bear Might took out a mini bomb from his backpack and handed it to Yun Jian. "There is." Everyone was stunned. The kosher mercenaries carried bombs with them at all times. "What are you going to do with the bomb?" Bo Zhan stood beside Yun Jian and asked her. Bo Zhan's question was on point. They were looking for a trap in the tomb. Why would they take out a bomb for no reason? Did they want to blow this place up so that no one would be able to leave alive? "There's wind on the other side. That means there's a passage behind this mud wall. But this mud wall is blocking our way." Yun Jian pointed at a spot and explained. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why didn't they hear the wind on the other side? That's strange. If that's the case, there must be a trap here, right? Isn't it bad to blow up the meeting like this? Sun Jinxiong asked suspiciously. As he spoke, he continued to analyze. Moreover, there should have been quite a number of people who found the mechanism and went to the other side of the mud wall before us. So why should we just blow it up? Because I'm too lazy to wait for you guys to slowly find the mechanism. Besides, I have a bomb. Wouldn't it be more convenient to just blow it up? Yun Jian raised her eyebrows at Sun Jinxiong. She snapped her fingers and swung the bomb in her hand leisurely. She couldn't wait to find him. This explanation left everyone speechless. At this time, Yun Jian warned, You guys stay away. After everyone had retreated a distance away, Yun Jian ignited the bomb and threw it at the mud wall. She didn't look the least bit flustered as she lay on the ground. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The dust and dirt that flew up from the explosion hit them in the face. After the dust and dirt settled on the ground, everyone shone their flashlights at the small hole that was blasted open by the explosion. In front of the small hole, on the other side of the mud wall, was a passageway. It's really a passage, Sun Jinxiong shouted in surprise. At the same time, he turned his head and saw that the girl seemed to have everything under control. He couldn't help but gulp. Chapter 218. Let's go. Yun Jian stood up and patted her dusty clothes. She took the lead and walked towards the small hole that was blown up. When the others saw this, they all followed suit. Yi Yanting had fainted. Ling Tianhao had no choice but to stay even though he did not want to care about her. At this moment, other than the two of them, the others continued to move forward. There was no way back. The only thing left for them was to move forward. Tap, tap, tap. The surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of footsteps could be heard, and the endless darkness that could be seen when one looked up. Splash, splash, splash. There seemed to be the sound of flowing water in the distance. There's the sound of flowing water over there. Everyone moved forward quickly in surprise. There's also human voices. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She took the lead and suddenly said this. Everyone was stunned out of habit. No one heard human voices, except for Yun Jian. However, after the incident where Yun Jian directly blew up the tunnel, everyone had tacitly chosen to believe her words. As expected, after walking for about 4 to 5 minutes, mixed human voices came from the other end of the tunnel. Yun Jian and the others could feel it as well. The passage was gradually widening again, until finally, a mud hole the size of a basketball court appeared in front of everyone's eyes. On this empty land, groups of people and horses were all gathered together. Some even set up tents on this open space. Soon, everyone realized that these people were the ones who entered the tomb and did not come out again. Beside this huge mud hole, there was a stream of water that came from nowhere. It flowed out from the first corner, and then flowed out from the last corner. The most amazing thing was that this stream of water, which came from an unknown source, was filled with lively little fish and shrimps. There were quite a lot of them. This was the world of the underground people, not to mention Bojan and the others. Even Yun Jian could not help but smile. At this moment, Sun Jinxiong and the others seemed to have seen someone they knew in the crowd. Professor Su. Sun Jinxiong and the others rushed forward. You guys are here too? The man called Dr. Su was full of energy. He was about 50 or 60 years old, and was a very energetic old man. Professor Su was also stunned when he saw Sun Jinxiong and the others. It was obvious that Sun Jinxiong and the others had been sent to the tomb by Z Country to look for Professor Su, who had also been buried. It could be seen that Professor Su held a high position in Z Country and was highly valued. Professor Su, what's going on here? Why didn't anyone come out of the tomb? Sun Jinxiong asked. Yun Jian and the others stood in the distance and listened. Professor Su pointed at a stone door carved with dragons and phoenixes. He sighed and said, "It's not that we can't go back, it's that no one wants to." When everyone heard this, they were instantly stunned. Professor Su explained the whole story in detail. After the first person to enter the tomb discovered this place, he refused to leave. There was one reason. There were a few ancient characters engraved on the stone door with the dragon and phoenix carvings. The experts and scholars studied it for several days, and finally deciphered the translation of the ancient characters. The translated meaning of the words on the stone door was, "Pass through this stone door, and you will know all the secrets of the sandalwood box." Of course, those who wanted to pass through this stone door had to stay here for a whole year. Everyone present was here to decipher the secrets of the sandalwood box. Of course, they refused to leave. Moreover, there were large numbers of fish and prawns in the flowing water. Once they stayed here, they could catch fish and prawns and cook them. They did not have to worry about starving to death. In the eyes of outsiders, the people who entered the tomb had already become horrifying skeletons. Professor Su, since you're here, why don't you contact the outside world? Sun Jianxiong asked the key question. Professor Su shook his head and smiled. There's no signal here. After he said that, everyone took out their communicators and looked. There was no signal. Yun Jian came over while everyone was still in shock. She looked at Professor Su and asked, May I ask if you've seen a handsome man who's about 19 years old and is 185 meters tall? There are 2 people with him? She was naturally asking about CE. She looked around, but still could not find him. She could not help but worry. Chapter 219. Sun Jianxiong, Bo Zhan, and the rest were stunned by Professor Su's words. Sun Jianxiong in particular was the first to realize that something was amiss, so he continued questioning Professor Su. That's not right, Professor Su. You said that one has to stay here for a year to pass through the stone door. But even if this tomb was excavated first, the person who entered the tomb had only stayed here for a few months at most, right? What I mean is, how could that young man have already entered the stone door? Sun Jianxiong asked out of curiosity. After all of them, including Yun Jian, had just made their way here. It could be said that they knew nothing about the recent happenings in the tomb. Let me finish first. Professor Su gulped. He immediately became spirited, looking at the group with a solemn gaze, and continued. You can pass through the stone door by staying here for a year. That's only one option. So there's another option? This time, Yun Jian asked. Professor Su then looked at Yun Jian and nodded. That's right. As he spoke, Professor Su frowned and pointed at an open stone cave beside the stone door. This stone cave is another way to pass through other than the stone door, Professor Su said. Bo Zhan and Fu Xian were both expert grave robbers, so they were well versed in mechanisms. Fu Xian was the first to notice that the stone cave was unusual. Fu Xian shouted in shock. That stone cave has a monstrous mechanism in it. As he spoke, he ran over to check out the cave entrance, then returned to the group. Let alone a person, even a fly would find it difficult to pass through this cave. Fu Xian was deeply shocked when he said this. That's right. Professor Su nodded. No one believed it at first, and insisted on passing through the stone cave first, saying that they didn't want to wait a year for the stone door to open. Professor Su continued, his expression turning solemn. In the end, without exception, all of them died tragically in this cave. Their flesh was mangled, their bodies pierced by thousands of arrows. When the group heard this, they could not help but shudder. He passed, Yun Jian said after listening to Professor Su from the side. It was not a question but a confirmation. He must have passed. Yes, only that young man and his 2 subordinates passed through the cave. When Professor Su said this, his entire body was filled with an unprecedented excitement. None of the people gathered here were ordinary people, and there were many assassins and secret agents. However, those who insisted on entering the cave and didn't want to wait a year for the stone door to open all died tragically in the cave. CE was the only one who passed. On the other hand, the mechanisms in this cave were set up one after another. It had to be said that the tomb builder was very powerful. The mechanism he built would only activate when a creature wanted to pass through. Furthermore, it could be used repeatedly. In other words, even if the mechanism was used once, it could still be used hundreds or thousands of times. Yun Jian's lips curled up even more. She gently pursed her lips, and her smile became even more unbridled. You guys stay here, I'll go look for him. Yun Jian looked straight at the people in front of her. Her casual words caused everyone present to be dumbfounded. What? Yun Jian, you want to go through that cave? Sun Jianxiong cried out involuntarily. This isn't a joke. Bo Zhan followed up. Professor Su, on the other hand, looked at Yun Jian fiercely. She was only 15 or 16 years old, right? Did she really have the ability to go through that cave? It should be known that those who had tried to pass through the hole, but had failed and died tragically, were all internationally renowned figures. There was even one person who was ranked 6th on the international secret agent list. Even that person did not pass through that cave. Chapter 220. Little girl, you want to go through that cave too? Don't you know how many people have died in that cave? Only the last batch of people who didn't want to take the risk stayed behind and stayed here, waiting for the stone door to open. Professor Su took a deep breath. Then Professor Su used the tone of an elder reprimanding a junior, and continued to lecture Yun Jian. This is not a child's play. Only that young man and his two subordinates have succeeded in breaking through this cave. Life is precious. How can you waste your hard-earned life like this? Professor Su was sure that Yun Jian would not be able to pass through the mechanism in this cave. If she forced her way through, she would end up with 1,000 arrows piercing through her heart. After all, Yun Jian was so young that he could not convince himself even if he wanted to. What's more, he was a scientific researcher. To believe that a little girl like Yun Jian, who had not even reached puberty, would be able to break through that cave. That was a fool's dream. Although Professor Su was doing this for Yun Jian's sake, he did not want to see anyone make unnecessary sacrifices. But when the words came out of his mouth, his tone became not so pleasing. That's right, Yun Jian. Don't do something so risky. Professor Su must have his reasons. Sun Jinxiong helped Professor Su to persuade Yun Jian. Bo Zhan and Fu Xian did not believe that Yun Jian could pass through this cave. But the two of them did not say anything. As for Bear Might and the others, they simply remained silent. Bear Might was silent, because he had already guessed Yun Jian's shocking identity. If Yun Jian was really one of the kosher mercenaries, how could a mere cave trap her? If she wanted to pass through that cave, it would be as easy as lifting a finger. Do you think I would joke around with my life? Yun Jian sneered. She continued, I'm just letting you know, I'm not asking for your permission. She, Yun Jian, had never sought permission from others before. Yun Jian's arrogant words made everyone present stop talking. Our Professor Su is doing this for your own good. How can a little girl like you be so ungrateful? At this moment, a woman standing behind Dr. Su yelled at Yun Jian to defend Dr. Su. The woman's name was Jiang Jiaoxue. Jiang Jiaoxue was Professor Su's assistant. It was normal for a renowned scholar like Professor Su to have a few assistants around him. Jiang Jiaoxue was proud of being able to work under Professor Su, so she was arrogant and domineering. When she saw Yun Jian refuting Professor Su, who she respected, she couldn't help but retaliate. Yun Jian merely curled her lips slightly and ignored Jiang Jiaoxue. She merely glanced at Xiong Wei and the others and said, All of you stay here. As she spoke, she walked towards the cave. You can't go. You can't go. Seeing that Yun Jian didn't listen to his advice, and hated her for not listening to him, Professor Su was even more annoyed. However, Bo Zhan noticed that Xiong Wei and the others who belonged to the kosher mercenaries, along with Yun Jian, were not panicking at all. Bo Zhan was observant, and he couldn't help but look at the girl, who was walking towards the cave. He saw that Yun Jian had arrived in front of the cave. She lifted her leg and jumped into the cave while Bo Zhan, Professor Su, and everyone else who was waiting for the stone door to open gasped in shock and fear. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. As expected, after Yun Jian entered the cave's mechanism was activated. Countless flying arrows rained down and were aimed at Yun Jian. Just when everyone was imagining Yun Jian's tragic ending, Bo Zhan flipped over. With a few somersaults and agile steps, Yun Jian leaped across the cave where countless experts had died. She turned a corner and vanished from the spot swiftly. She. Professor Su's mouth was agape in shock, and he couldn't catch his breath. Chapter 221. Such skills. No wonder she's the #1 in the kosher mercenaries. Even Bear Might could not help but praise Yun Jian's agility. As he spoke, Bear Might could not help but admire and respect Yun Jian. What did you say? She's from the kosher mercenaries? Professor Su, who was standing aside, heard Bear Might's exclamation and could not help but shout. Bo Zhan, on the other hand, heard another word in Bear Might's words. #1. Yun Jian is the #1 in the kosher mercenaries. Bo Zhan asked Bear Might, dumbfounded. Who would have thought that Xiong Wei would just snort at these people who had turned pale with fright, ignoring them? Bear Might thought to himself that if these people knew Yun Jian's true identity, they would faint from fright. Even so, it was enough to shock Bo Zhan, Professor Su and the rest. Even if Professor Su was not involved in these matters, he had heard of the prestige of the Kosha mercenaries. There were only a few people who could be called the number one in the Kosha mercenaries, and each of them definitely had a place in the international rankings. It was no wonder that Yun Jian would act the way she did earlier. She was arrogant because she had the right to be arrogant. Jiang Jiaoxue, on the other hand, clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. From Professor Su and the rest's shock, she could tell that the little girl who spoke rudely just now was actually a big shot. No, she could not accept it. But in the end, Jiang Jiaoxue could only swallow her anger. On the other hand, Yun Jian passed the first checkpoint of the cave effortlessly and switched on the only lighter she had to light up the path ahead before she continued to move forward alone. Compared to when she was just reborn, her skills and agility had improved by leaps and bounds. Of course, this was also due to the results of her recent training in the military training camp. Tap, tap, tap. Stepping on the water that flowed out of nowhere, Yun Jian kept moving forward. But the strange thing was that after she passed through the small mechanism at the entrance of the cave, nothing dangerous happened. Even so, Yun Jian did not forget to maintain her initial vigilance. No one could predict what would appear in the next second, or what they would encounter in this pitch-black tunnel. Yun Jian walked for about 15 minutes when she heard the sound of rushing water. She quickened her pace. After turning a corner, a bright light flashed in front of her eyes. Bright light? Yun Jian frowned suspiciously. When she saw the scenery in front of her again, she had reached the end of the cave tunnel. The end of the cave was actually a world of its own. And if she guessed correctly, she had already left the tomb. Because when they walked out from the end of the tunnel, the scorching sun was right above their heads. The exit? Out? Could it be that the so-called secret of the sandalwood? And the people waiting bitterly for the stone door to open were just waiting for a secret that did not exist? Just as Yun Jian was thinking this, a tall and handsome figure suddenly rushed past her. Just as Yun Jian was about to retaliate, a familiar scent wafted into her nose. The next second, she was pulled into the other party's embrace. Why are you here? Ce frowned and pulled Yun Jian under his protection. Yun Jian felt a wave of dizziness, but she did not push Ce away. She did not feel that there was anything wrong with this. Instead, she leaned her head against Ce's chest. You lost contact, so I came to look for you, she whispered. Did Shuang tell you privately? Ce's clear voice came from above Yun Jian. There was a trace of anger in his voice, as well as a trace of joy that even he himself did not notice. Chapter 222. Yun Jian buried her head in Ce's chest. She then added, I wanted to look for you myself. A smile appeared on Ce's handsome face. He looked down at Yun Jian and reached out to stroke Yun Jian's head. Thank goodness you're all right. He had managed to get past the traps in the cave, even though it was a piece of cake for him. However, he would still be worried for Yun Jian, even if she was confident that she would be able to get past such a dangerous trap. Yun Jian's cheeks flushed instantly when he stroked her head for no reason. She did not know why she did not push Ce away at that moment. Ce's pleasant scent wafted into her nose. Ahem ahem. An untimely cough interrupted Yun Jian and Ce's embrace. Yun Jian quickly wriggled out of Ce's embrace, her heart thumping wildly. This was the first time she had been caught hugging a man in a messy position. Slaying God, the king of international secret agents and the world's number one, was blushing because of this? Young master, we have a new discovery. Adam, who had just interrupted the intimacy between the two of them, touched the bridge of his nose, his handsome face carrying a hint of teasing. Their young master was really interested in this woman. Would this woman become the young madam of their young master? Ce's lips curled slightly. He flashed a satisfied smile at an angle that Yun Jian could not see. Let's go. Ce held Yun Jian's hand. Feeling the warmth of his large palm, Yun Jian did not reject him, nor was she shy. She regained her senses and asked him seriously, Where are we? How did we get out of the cave? Could it be that the secret of the sandalwood box is not in this ancient tomb? Could it be that the people below have been waiting and anticipating for nothing? Ce frowned. He looked down at Yunjian and said without holding back, I suspect that we've entered another world. Another world? Yunjian asked in surprise. That's why I got Adam and Emo-san to investigate just now, Ce said with a mesmerizing smile on his face. His handsome face twitched slightly and he continued, Now we have a new discovery. His patient explanation made Adam, who was leading the team, pause. Since when did young master have such a gentle and patient side? Adam was stunned. He led Yunjian and Ce through the forest, and finally arrived in front of a huge rock. There were a few lines of ancient words carved on the rock. Emo-san was standing next to the rock. Emo-san was looking at the words on the rock. Seeing Adam leading Ce and Yunjian over, Emo-san called out to Ce, Young master. Ce nodded and looked at Emo-san pointing to the rock in front of them. He said to him and Yunjian, The words on this rock do not belong to any country or dynasty. I can't translate its meaning. Emo-san frowned bitterly as he spoke. Ce couldn't help but take a second look at the words that even Emo-san couldn't translate. This is. Yunjian suddenly stretched out her hand. She took 2 steps forward and placed her hand in the middle of the words on the rock under Ce's suspicious and Adam and Emo-san's surprised gazes. The sandalwood box is an ancient divine artifact of the Yulong continent. The person who owns it must have supreme divine power and the ability to bring the dead back to life. Yunjian looked at the words on the rock and read them out loud. After she finished speaking, even she was stunned. Ce, Adam and Emo-san were even more surprised. Chapter 223. Yunjian didn't know how she could understand the words engraved on the rock. It was just that when she first saw them, she suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu. Then, she read them out based on her feelings. Ce turned to look at Yunjian. Seeing that her eyebrows were tightly knitted together, he reached out his slender fingers and smoothed them out for her. There was a gentle light in his eyes. Beside him, Emo-san looked at Yunjian solemnly and asked, You can understand these words? Yunjian shifted her gaze away from Ce. She shook her head and nodded at Emo-san. It feels like déjà vu. When I saw these words, I translated them out of habit. Yulong mainland, Ce murmured softly with a raised brow looking at the bold words on the rock. Then this world is the Yulong continent you mentioned, Ce said in a firm tone. The reason why Ce was so sure that this place wasn't the world they originally lived in was because the flowers, grass, water, and wood of this world were different from the original world. This was Ce's feeling as well, so he told him directly. This was definitely not the place they originally lived in. It was the same as Yunjian's intuition that the words on the rock were translated. Ce even felt that this world made him feel as if he originally belonged here. Young master, the sandalwood box has been set up. We can go now. Adam, who had been sent out to set up the sandalwood box, came back and said to Ce. Ce nodded slightly. Let's go. Ce held Yunjian's small hand and walked back the way they came. The sandalwood box originally belonged here. He was just returning it to its rightful owner. As for where this place was, it was no longer within their scope of consideration. Yunjian followed Ce's tall figure as they walked back step by step. She glanced at him from time to time, feeling warm in her heart. However, no one knew that their conflict with the Yulong continent was far from over. Of course, this was a story for later. Somewhere in the Yulong mainland, a 10-meter-tall crystal ball stood in the middle of a large hall. Crack! Suddenly, there was a loud noise, and a huge crack appeared on the tall crystal ball. In the next second, the entire crystal ball miraculously collapsed. I'm back. The sorcerer god had reappeared. The sorcerer tribe has been waiting for thousands of years. Sorcerer god, you're finally back. In the center of the hall, a young girl around 16 or 17 years old shouted excitedly. She was dressed in black clothes. She had waited for thousands of years in the sorcerer tribe. It had been thousands of years since the sorcerer god had fallen. When the sorcerer god had fallen, she had promised that she would return in 1,000 years. The breaking of the crystal ball signified the return of the sorcerer god. Yunjian and Ce had easily exited the cave's mechanism and returned to where Professor Su, Bojan and the rest were. As soon as they saw Yun Jian and the other three coming out of the cave, everyone crowded around them. Everyone wanted to know what secrets were hidden behind the stone door. Miss Yun, did you find anything inside? Professor Su was the first to rush up and ask. Even the way he addressed her had changed from a little girl to Miss Yun. You guys can go take a look for yourselves. Yun Jian's lips curved into a half-smile. Her answer elicited more dissatisfaction from the group. Everyone knew that they did not have the ability to break through the cave, so they came to ask her. Jiang Jiaoxue had been tolerating Yun Jian for a long time. Seeing this, she could not help but be the first to shout. It's because we can't pass through the cave that we're asking you. How can you be like this? So what if you tell us what you saw inside? It won't hurt you at all, right? Little girl, you're quite capable, but it's not right to be so arrogant. Jiang Jiaoxue dared to speak to Yun Jian this way, because she had caught a glimpse of Ce not far away. Yun Jian was not the only one who had entered the cave. Why was she so arrogant? Therefore, Jiang Jiaoxue was certain that a handsome person like Ce would definitely tell her what had happened inside. She turned around and asked Ce, "Hey, handsome, I saw that you've been in the cave too. Can you tell us what happened inside?" Chapter 224. Jiang Jiaoxue was very pretty. Although she wasn't as pretty as Yun Jian, she had a pair of long, fair legs that men loved. She was almost 1.7 meters tall and stood out from the crowd. Coupled with her good looks, she was the campus belle of the school, even when she was still in school. In addition, Jiang Jiaoxue had excellent grades since she was a student, so she became Professor Su's assistant at a young age. This was something that Jiang Jiaoxue was proud of. One had to admit that Jiang Jiaoxue was a woman that men would fall in love with. Not only did she have a good figure and good looks, but she also had excellent grades. Jiang Jiaoxue also admitted that there weren't many men who could be seduced by her. She saw that Ce was so handsome and had shown good skills, so she took the opportunity to seduce him. At the same time, she wanted to ask about everything that Ce, Yun Jian, and the others had seen after entering the cave. That was why Jiang Jiaoxue threw Ce a seductive glance. She even felt that it was advisable to sacrifice her beauty when necessary. After all, no ordinary man could resist her charm. Unfortunately, Ce wasn't an ordinary man. Get lost. Jiang Jiaoxue was feeling smug, and thought that Ce would answer her. Then, she would sneer at Yun Jian and provoke Ce. Suddenly, Ce spat out a word, instantly shattering all of Jiang Jiaoxue's fantasies. This one word was shouted in front of everyone. It was obvious that Ce didn't take Jiang Jiaoxue seriously at all. Huh? Yun Jian crossed her arms and watched. She already knew that this would be the result. Jiang Jiaoxue was stunned by Ce's shout. She didn't react for a long time. Unfortunately, Jiang Jiaoxue wasn't an ordinary woman. Her skin was so thick that even bullets couldn't pierce it. When she came back to her senses, she moved closer to Ce again. This time, she even wanted to move her body towards Ce. "Handsome, don't be so fierce. We're all on the same side. If you're so fierce, I'll be scared." As she spoke, Jiang Jiaoxue wanted to take a big step forward and press her whole body against Ce. She felt that Ce had just shouted at her in front of so many people, making her lose face. She didn't believe that there was a man who couldn't be subdued by a woman. Despite Jiang Jiaoxue's appearance, she was a famous social butterfly in the upper class. What kind of man would not be obedient in her hands? In spite of it, before Jiang Jiaoxue could take 2 steps closer to Ce, she was shocked by Adam, who stood beside him. Jiang Jiaoxue wasn't the only one who was shocked. Everyone present was shocked as well. Adam took out a desert eagle from his waist and pointed it at Jiang Jiaoxue, who was about to step forward. He threatened, "If you dare to take another step closer to our young master, I'll blow your head off." Then, Adam fired a shot at Jiang Jiaoxue's position. The gun whizzed towards Jiang Jiaoxue. Amidst Jiang Jiaoxue's threatening screams, the gun flew past her side and finally hit the mud wall. He really did shoot. Jiang Jiaoxue was so scared that her face turned pale. If even Ce's subordinates dared to do this, she was sure that if she were to do something again in the next second, the bullet would go through her head instead. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but tremble. Ce held Yunjian's hand again under everyone's gaze. He didn't say a word and walked out without looking back. Chapter 225. Seeing that Yunjian, Ce and the rest had left the stone door, some of the people who had been waiting for a long time felt that it was impossible. There might really be no treasure behind the stone door. If there was really a treasure or the secret of the sandalwood box, then how could Yunjian and Ce come out of the stone cave so quickly? Hence, a portion of the people left with Yunjian and Ce. As the saying goes, 1 spreads to 10, and 10 spreads to 100. In the end, there were only a few people left waiting for the stone door to open. In fact, they could be counted with one hand. If they knew that there was another world behind the stone door, and that the sandalwood box was there, they would have raced their brains to get in. It was a pity that they did not know about these things. Moreover, when Yunjian and the rest walked out, it was as if there was really nothing behind the stone door. Hence, the group felt that it was futile to wait any longer, so they left one by one. When they reached the stairs, it was the first trap they encountered when they went down the dry well. Since the mechanical puppet would automatically shut down once it walked in, and the activation mechanism was outside, the group of people were at a loss as to what to do. How are we going to get out? A young man who had lived here for a long time asked. Yunjian, did you see any traps? Bojan saw the situation and moved to stand beside Yunjian. No, Yunjian replied faintly. Then she added, but I have a way to get out. Once they heard that Yunjian had a way out, the group gathered around her. Yunjian was now different in their hearts. She was someone who had the ability to break through the stone cave full of arrows. Even though Yunjian looked very young, what she had done earlier was enough to convince everyone. What is it? Bojan asked immediately, his eyes filled with anticipation. From the beginning, Yunjian's performance was different from the rest. Bojan was an expert grave robber himself, but he had never seen someone like Yunjian, who could see through the traps with just one look. Hence, he placed his hopes on Yunjian. It's simple. Yunjian's lips curled slightly, and she said in the next second, if we can't get out, then we'll blow it up. Yunjian's words caused an uproar among the crowd. Bojan, on the other hand, twitched the corner of his mouth. He recalled the scene of Yunjian blowing up the mud wall, and his heart twitched uncontrollably. Wasn't it too casual for the kosher mercenaries to carry bombs around and set them off at any time? When Yunjian took out the last bullet she had looted from Bear Might, however, those who had never seen a bomb before were stunned. He even brought a bomb into the tomb. That's amazing. Someone said with deep emotion. Boom. Just as that person exclaimed, Yunjian had already blown open the door of the confinement mechanism and walked out with Ce. Although the dry well was very high, it was a piece of cake for Yunjian, Ce, Adam and Emo-san, who had been training all year round. Hence they quickly climbed out. Outside the dry well, Yu Bufan had been hesitating outside the dry well ever since his two good friends, Bojan and Fu Xian, brought Yunjian and the rest into the tomb. He was very worried that his two friends would never return after entering the tomb. Even the communicator in his hand showed that there was no signal on their side. He paced back and forth anxiously and helplessly. Bufan, don't you know the truth of that rumor? These people are going into the tomb one by one. Aren't they just sending themselves to their deaths? How long has it been? Look at the people who went into the tomb. Are there still people coming out? Even if there are still people alive, they must have starved to the point that only a pile of bones is left. Someone stood in front of Yu Bufan and advised him. This person suddenly saw Yu Bufan looking at the dry well in shock. He followed Yu Bufan's gaze suspiciously and saw Yunjian and Ce jumping out of the dry well one after another. Chapter 226. Yu Bufan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw Yunjian jumping out of the dry well so easily. You actually, how did you? The person who had been persuading Yu Bufan earlier was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped to the ground. How could someone who had entered this tomb come back alive? This was different from what the rumors said. Just as this person finished speaking, Adam and Mawson jumped out of the dry well one after another with a plop sound. Both of them were skilled as they stood behind CE without making a sound after exiting the well. You guys actually came out alive? This is a tomb, ah? The person who had been persuading Yu Bufan earlier pointed at Yunjian, and the rest with a trembling finger. One had to know that the first person to excavate this tomb had already been down for half a year, and there were many people who had continued to enter the tomb. But this tomb was like a black hole that no one could return from. No one who had gone down had ever come back up. In the end, all the rumors that this tomb was haunted or evil had spread. This made those who wanted to enter the tomb shrink back, who didn't cherish their own lives. But what did he see today? Someone had climbed out of the dry well alive? This was simply a world-class miracle. Why? We can't live. Yunjian raised her eyebrows and smiled at the person, looking relaxed and refreshed. When she knew that CE had met with an accident, she was really shocked. But now that CE was fine, her heart was at ease. Yunjian, have you seen Bojan and Fuxian? Yu Bufan walked towards Yunjian with a frown. He was naturally worried about his two good friends. Now that he saw Yunjian and the rest come out, he couldn't help but ask her with a sigh of relief. Aren't they climbing? Yunjian turned sideways to let Yu Bufan have a clear view of the dry well. They saw a pair of hands suddenly climbing and grabbing onto the rim of the dry well, then kicking hard. Everyone saw a person suddenly appear in front of them. At this moment, he was struggling to climb out of the well. Once Bojan climbed out of the well, he waved his hand to wipe off his cold sweat. He turned to look at Yunjian and sighed. Why is this well so high? I can see how easy it was for all of you to get out. If I knew that climbing would be so tiring, I should have asked you to ask Bufan to throw a rope down to save us. When Yu Bufan and the other man heard this, they noticed a word. When Bojan said we, did that mean that there were quite a number of people still alive? Both of them turned pale with fright. In the end, with Bojan's help, they found a group of people to rescue everyone from the dry well. In the end, when Bojan and the rest were brought up, Bojan merely described Yunjian's capabilities. In the end, when Bojan went to look for Yunjian to explain to everyone, Yunjian and CE were long gone. At the same time, Bear Mite's group was also present. Yunjian had already robbed Bear Mite in his men's off-road vehicle and was rushing back to Country Z's airport with CE and the rest. Bear Mite and his men who were robbed were on the brink of tears, but once they thought of Yunjian's identity, they could only accept the fact that they were robbed by her. At the airport, Adam and Mo-sun were sent to work by CE. CE, on the other hand, boarded the plane back to Country Z's Longmen City with Yunjian. What they did not know was that what happened in the catacomb in the coming days would make international headlines. Chapter 227. Since they had prepared an excuse beforehand, neither Qin Yiru nor the school found it odd when Yunjian disappeared for the past few days. After Yunjian had settled down, she received news from Zhang Jifan. The renovation of the shop was done. What was lacking now was a channel to import cars. Yunjian had already contacted the channel to import cars. Once the shop was done, she sent a luring witch to contact the relevant personnel. Furthermore, Zhang Jifan was the one who contacted all the relevant personnel. Since it was a car dealership, the sales volume of cars was not high in 1998. By the standards of some families in this era, cars were considered a high consumable. Not only did the purchase of a car require a constant supply of fuel, the car itself was not cheap. In addition, there was the need to pay taxes and a series of related matters. Buying a car like this was not an easy task. Therefore, she was planning to sell it to the rich and powerful bosses at the moment. Yunjian's new cruise had just been established, and its reputation in Longmen City was not established yet. Some of the bosses had not even heard of New Cruise's name, let alone come here to look at and buy cars. Under such circumstances, Yunjian planned to hold a large-scale auto show in Longmen City. As the name suggested, an auto show was to showcase cars to the public, while inviting reputable figures to watch the show to increase the company's reputation. Of course, there were monetary conditions to hold an auto show. Yunjian did not have to worry about that. As for inviting reputable figures to watch the show, Yunjian already had plans for that. As for the auto show, Yunjian had moved it to a month later. Within this month, she had asked Zhang Jifan to arrange the car and get them to stay in it. At the same time, she had him prepare everything related to the auto show. As for other matters such as inviting reputable figures to the auto show, she would take care of them. Zhang Jifan was now obedient to Yunjian in every way, so he nodded in agreement to Yunjian's arrangements. When Yunjian came home today, she realized that Qin Yiru was home early. Qin Yiru was smiling as she made dinner for Yunjian and sat down with her. "Mom, what's wrong?" Yunjian asked, curious. Qin Yiru was always the last to come home. Although Qin Yiru's job as a hotel attendant was quite relaxing, she came home late. Today, Qin Yiru came home early, so Yunjian found it odd. "Xiao Jian, I found a better job. It's easy too. There's less work but the pay is high. It's 1,500 yuan a month." Back then, Qin Yiru's monthly income was only a few hundred yuan a month. She was over the moon. Seeing how happy Qin Yiru was, Yunjian was happy as well. Yunjian asked Qin Yiru, "Mom, what's the job?" I'm just a cleaner who cleans the floor, but the pay is high. It's not tiring. I just have to clean the entire place in the morning, afternoon and night." Qin Yiru answered cheerfully. She then continued, "The place I'm working at is the newly established New Cruise in our city. It's a company that sells cars. The boss is doing really well with his business. I heard that he spent more than 10 million yuan to buy this shop." Chapter 228. When she heard from Qin Yiru that her mother was working at New Cruise, Yunjian's eyelids twitched. Her mother's workplace had become her own company? Yunjian was taken aback by this as well. It was a good thing though. At least Qin Yiru was working at her company. It would be convenient for her to give Qin Yiru subsidies in the future. It was legitimate. At the same time, Yunjian was thinking if she should tell Zhang Jifan the next time she saw him to give the cleaning lady a raise. "Xiao Jian, are you listening to me?" Qin Yiru waved her hand a few times in front of Yunjian when she saw that Yunjian was distracted. "I'm listening, Mom." Yunjian answered with a smile at Qin Yiru with squinted eyes. Qin Yiru nodded and continued with her thoughts. "Xiao Jian, I just think that we've been bothering your Auntie Dong for too long. I feel bad about it. I've saved some money these days and want to rent a place. Let's move out of here first. When I've saved enough money in the future, I'll come back and visit your Auntie Dong properly," Qin Yiru said. Yunjian understood Qin Yiru right away. Qin Yiru thought that they had been bothering her for too long. It was someone else's house after all, so it was not appropriate. "Mom, I'm fine with it. I'll listen to you," Yunjian said. She really was fine with it. To her, moving to another place was just a change of sleeping place. "Xiao Jian, you're not against it?" Qin Yiru was surprised. After all, moving out of the villa meant that their living environment would be much worse than it was now. Qin Yiru was thinking that if Yunjian did not want to move to a worse environment, she would not move out first. After some time, when he had enough money on hand, he would rent a decent place to rent before moving out. I'll leave it to you," Yunjian said with a nod. "Okay, then tomorrow morning when your Auntie Dong is here, let's talk to her about it," Qin Yiru said. Qin Yiru was really grateful to Dong Ruan. When she was at her lowest, it was her old friend who took her family in. However, now that she had money on hand, she felt that she had disturbed him for too long and should move out. That was all. After all, everyone had a family. Although they were childhood best friends, they were now married. Although Dong Ruan's husband had passed away, she felt that it was inappropriate for her to disturb them for too long. The next day, Dong Ruan rested at home. When Qin Yiru mentioned this to Dong Ruan refused at first. But later, for some reason, he was convinced. At the same time, Dong Ruan also took a few days off to find the most comfortable rental apartment for Qin Yiru. Qin Yiru wanted to look for it herself, but she could not resist her best friend's enthusiasm in the end. Soon a rental apartment was found. Early in the morning, Qin Yuru brought Yunjian to move out with bags of various sizes. Yunjian did not have a lot of things. She only had a backpack, and there were not many things in it. Xiao Jian, is everything ready? Qin Yuru asked Yunjian with bags of various sizes. Dong Ruan had also taken a day off to help Qin Yuru move things. She looked at Yunjian as well. Everything's ready, Yunjian answered with a nod. Let's go then, Qin Yuru said and pushed the bags out the door. Screech! There was the sound of a car braking, and the door was opened. Ce had just returned from the door when he saw Yunjian and Qin Yuru walking out with bags of various sizes. He asked with a frown, "What are you guys doing?" "Ye's back. Auntie, I've been bothering you all these days. I'm moving out today. Come Xiao Jian, say goodbye to Ai," Qin Yuru told Ce. She had been addressing Ce in an affectionate tone like an elder these days, and it was tacitly acknowledged. When Ce heard Qin Yuru's explanation, his brows furrowed, and he was already in front of Yunjian, his tall frame looming over her. Chapter 229. Both Qin Yuru and Dong Ruan were flabbergasted by Ce's inexplicable action. Yunjian, who stood in front of Ce, felt her eyelids twitch. Her heart was beating uncontrollably with a thump-thump-thump sound. Yeah, Auntie and Xiao Jian have already found a place outside. We're planning to move in today. Qin Yuru's voice softened as she faced the fuming Ce. Even Qin Yuru herself did not realize it. Why did she not think that Ce's action was odd? To Qin Yuru, she was also someone who had never been involved in love. Qin Yuru had never liked Yunjian's biological father, Yungang. Back then, her family was not doing well and wanted her to marry Yungang, so she did. Qin Yuru had never experienced the joy of love, so she found Ce's inexplicable action strange as well. Dong Ruan, on the other hand, was different. She was stunned for a moment before she realized what was going on. Could her nephew have feelings for Yunjian? Interested? Dong Ruan knew that Ce was 19 years old, and no woman had ever been able to get close to him. No woman dared to even take a few steps closer to him, let alone get close to him. Ever since Ce's mother, who was also her biological sister, passed away, Dong Ruan had been protective of Ce like a mother. It was because Ce was a child without a mother since he was young, so Dong Ruan had to take care of him. What Dong Ruan was most worried about was Ce's marriage in the future. Her nephew was proficient in everything, and his appearance was so handsome that it was indescribable. It was just that he had never been enlightened when it came to relationships. Therefore, Dong Ruan's heart skipped a beat when she saw the scene. Dong Ruan had her own selfish motives, but it was undeniable that she liked Yunjian quite a bit. Now that she saw Ce's action, Dong Ruan helped Ce persuade Qin Yuru. "Yuru, why are you insisting on moving out with your two children? Stay. Look, even my nephew can't bear for you guys to leave." As she spoke, Dong Ruan held Qin Yuru's hand and patted it. Her voice was soft and weary as she said, "Yuru, stay here. Look at me. I'm living alone in this empty villa. It's so lonely. My lover left early, and I'm glad that you guys are here these few days. My son goes to school too. I used to face this lonely house after work, and it was so disappointing. So Yuru, stay here." Dong Ruan said it sincerely. After Dong Ruan's husband passed away in a car accident, she had been living alone with her son. Although they were well off, her son studied in a closed-off aristocratic school and rarely returned home. Now that she saw Qin Yuru's family moving in, she was genuinely happy. As for Ce, he did not stay for long at Dong Ruan's house. When Dong Ruan persuaded Qin Yuru to stay, Ce's grip on Yunjian's hand tightened. She wanted to leave, but he would not let go. Yunjian pursed her lips. She wanted to say something, but when the words reached her mouth, she could not say anything. Qin Yuru did not seem to notice Ce's grip on Yunjian's hand. She was slow when it came to emotions. However, under Dong Ruan's repeated persuasion, Qin Yuru finally nodded with tears in her eyes. "All right, we'll stay." Yunjian's cheeks were already rosy. She struggled but could not break free. In the end, she could only give up. And Dong Ruan saw all of this. Chapter 230. The moment Ce heard Chin Yiru say that they would be staying, his handsome lips curled into a charming smile, without anyone noticing. She was not leaving. Then, he would be able to see her for as long as he stayed here, excluding the few days when Yunjian stayed in school. How nice! From then on, Ce would only go out to handle some necessary matters during the 5 days when Yunjian stayed in school. On the weekends when Yunjian came back from school, she would be able to see him every day. She was extremely surprised by this. Of course, this was all in the future. By the time Dong Ruan helped Chin Yiru move everything back to every corner of the villa, it was already 4:30 p.m. Dong Ruan glanced at Yunjian and Ce before saying to Chin Yiru, "Yiru, I don't have to go to work today. Since we're all here, I'll be the host tonight. Let's go to a restaurant together?" Dong Ruan was afraid that Chin Yiru would reject her. She could not help but recall the scene back then, so she said to Chin Yiru, "Yiru, do you remember when we snuck out of school to eat wontons when we didn't want to go to class in high school?" As she spoke, Dong Ruan was really immersed in her memories. She smiled and said bitterly, "That wonton shop is still open. Let's go there for dinner tonight. What do you think?" Dong Ruan suggested going to a restaurant because she wanted to buy more time for her nephew to spend with Yunjian. However, as she spoke, Dong Ruan could not help but reminisce about the stupid things she and Chin Yiru did back then. The two of them even learned to play truant from school just to eat a bowl of wontons. Chin Yiru had never approved of going to a restaurant. Perhaps it was because she had been through too much hardship that she could not change her habit. However, she more or less missed the place where she and Dong Ruan shared their memories. Okay. Chin Yiru agreed to it at once. The memories from the past were unforgettable. Now they had grown up, gotten married, and had children. However, the scenery of the past was blurred in his mind. Some things can change at will. For example, Dong Ruan's husband's accident, or Chin Yiru's marriage to Yun Gang was so heartless. But the only thing that made people nostalgic was memories. "Alright then, let's go over now," Dong Ruan said with a smile. In fact, there were only 4 people in this group. Dong Ruan's son was studying in an elite school, while Yun Jian's brother, Yun Yi, was studying in the school. After all, it was a key high school, and there was a lot of work to be done, so he rarely had time to rest. Dong Ruan's car was a black Audi sports car, which could only seat 2 people. Including Chin Yiru, Yun Jian, Ce, and Dong Ruan herself, there were a total of 4 people. This meant that they had to drive 2 cars, and 2 people in 1 car. "Yiru, sit in my car. Let's talk about the past." "How much I miss those days," Dong Ruan said as she pulled Chin Yiru's hand and walked to her Audi sports car. At the same time, she did not forget to reassure Chin Yiru and not to worry about Yun Jian. "Ai has a driver's license. He'll drive your Xiaojian. The 2 young people will have something to talk about when they're together." Yun Jian, who stood at the back, was dumbfounded. She was speechless. After Dong Ruan drove away with Chin Yiru, Ce came over. His handsome eyes and lips curled as he told her softly, "Let's go." Chapter 231. Dong Ruan started the engine and drove off in the Audi without waiting for Yun Jian and Ce. By the time Yun Jian got into Ce's Lamborghini, Dong Ruan had already driven a long distance away. Yun Jian instantly felt as though she had been tricked into boarding a pirate ship. However, this wasn't the first time she had been in Ce's car. This time, however, she felt a little strange. When she turned her head and saw Ce's handsome face, she had the urge to blush. Fortunately, nothing happened along the way. Dong Ruan gave her location to Ce, so Ce quickly found the wonton shop they were at. This was an extremely old wonton shop. The decorations in the shop were from more than 10 or 20 years ago, which was already outdated for the current era. However, the shop's business had always been good, so the shop had been open until now and hadn't closed down. Many of the old shops in the surrounding area had already closed down or been sold, so this wonton shop was the only one that was still open. Above the door of the wonton shop, there were a few words written in block letters. Sue's Little Wonton. The owner of this wonton shop was an old lady in her 50s or 60s with the surname Sue. This shop was run by old lady Sue and her husband, But old lady Sue's husband had passed away a few years ago. When Si stopped the car and walked into the shop with Yun Jian, Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan were catching up with old lady Sue. In fact, old lady Sue knew Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan. When they were young, they loved to come to old lady Sue's wonton shop the most. At that time, old lady Sue was only Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan's age. Back then, Dong Ruan and Qin Yiru had played truant from school and realized that they had only brought enough money for a bowl of wonton. Later, old lady Sue asked her husband to make an extra bowl of wonton for them as a free gift. Dong Ruan and Qin Yiru had always remembered this incident and would never forget it. When they were seated, Dong Ruan deliberately pulled Qin Yiru to sit with her, forcing Yun Jian to sit with Ce. Yun Jian pursed her lips. Ce understood what his aunt meant, and a rare smile appeared on his handsome face. Here for bowls of wonton. They're fresh out of the pot, and the stuffing is all made this morning. Come and have a taste. Let's see if it tastes the same as it did 10 years ago. Old Madame Sue appeared to be full of vigor. She placed bowls of wonton in front of the 4 people. Yun Jian picked up a spoon and blew on the wonton gently before swallowing it down with some soup. The smell was very fragrant and delicious. She narrowed her eyes. In her previous life, she had traveled all over the world and eaten countless delicacies. However, this was the first time she had eaten such a delicious wonton that was bland, yet had a hint of natural flavor. This was even more delicious than those delicacies. Delicious. It tastes just as good as it did in the past. Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan couldn't help but exclaim in admiration as they tasted the wonton delicately. Eat more if it's delicious. Old Madame Sue covered her mouth and laughed. She had always held on to this wonton shop. After her husband's death, it became her only tie. This place was the place where she and her husband reminisced. As old Madame Sue reminisced with Qin Yiru and Dong Ruan, she couldn't help but steal a few glances at Yun Jian and Ce. In the end, old Madame Sue sighed and said, "These 2 children are so handsome. I think they look like husband and wife. These 2 children have a bright future ahead of them." This empty praise made Yun Jian choke on her wonton. She coughed a few times. "Are you okay?" Ce threw away the spoon in his hand and gently patted Yun Jian's back. Chapter 232. Old Madame Sue chuckled and looked at Ce like she had been there before, mumbling to herself, "Hey Ce, you're right. It's great to be young." Yun Jian choked harder at that. Ce pushed the stool away and stood up with his tall and muscular frame to go behind Yun Jian to pat her back. "Where do you feel uncomfortable? Eat slowly. Don't choke." Ce's gentle tone surprised Dong Ruan, who was his aunt. Her nephew had always prided himself as cold and aloof, usually not interested in women. But now, Dong Ruan could not help gulping as she thought about it. He was really interested this time. She wanted to give herself a thumbs up. It seemed like she was right to matchmake Yun Jian and her nephew. No matter how clueless Qin Yiru was about love, she should have noticed it by now. In spite of it, Qin Yiru was concerned about Yun Jian and did not notice anything else. She stood up quickly and asked Yun Jian frantically, "Xiao Jian, how are you? You didn't choke, did you? Don't rush to eat the wontons. Slow down. Eat slowly." As she spoke, Qin Yiru wanted to help Ce pat Yun Jian's back. "Yiru's fine. It's normal for her to choke. Let my Ai do it. He's good at this. Let him pat her, and she'll be done in no time." Dong Ruan pulled Qin Yiru and stood aside with a chuckle, covering her mouth. Qin Yiru, on the other hand, was completely relieved, thinking that Ce had learned some sort of massage. Yun Jian recovered quickly, her cheeks flushed. Ce's hand had slid up and down her back just now. She could even feel his hand touching her skin and brushing past the strap of her bra. The part of her body that had never been touched before was tingling. Yun Jian waved her hands quickly. "I'm fine. I just choked accidentally. I'm fine now." Ce wore a charming smile. Old Madame Sue was full of praise when she saw it. She was probably talking about Yun Jian and Ce together. Qin Yiru was amused by her words. In spite of it, Qin Yiru did not think otherwise. To her, Ce was excellent, be it his family background, character or looks. Her Xiao Jian was excellent in her heart too, but her family background was not good enough for someone like Ce. Otherwise, Qin Yiru would be more than willing to treat Ce as her son-in-law. Yun Jian was still young, but from Qin Yiru's point of view, 15 years old was the age to talk about marriage in a few years in the countryside. After they were done with the wontons, Dong Wan dragged Qin Yiru to walk around the street they used to frequent when they were younger. Without a doubt, Dong Wan had created an atmosphere for Ce to be alone with Yun Jian again. No matter how dumb Yun Jian was, she could tell what Dong Wan meant. She blushed but did not reject Ce's goodwill. She could feel that she was getting along with him, and she did not dislike it. However, she did not know how to feel more deeply about it. Yun Jian and Ce walked along a bustling street. Both of them were walking side by side. On the other hand, Ce, who stood beside Yun Jian, had his hands in his pockets with a smirk, looking happy. Both of them walked around aimlessly. The street was downtown, so there were many people coming and going. Suddenly, a lively figure flashed past Yun Jian's eyes. She was stunned when she saw who it was. The other party was taken aback as well. Wow! My Yun Jian! What a coincidence to run into you here. The person was none other than Chu Ning. Chu Ning was a year older than Yun Jian, and was currently in her first year of high school. Chapter 233. What a coincidence! Yun Jian said to Chu Ning with a squint. She did not dislike Chu Ning. In fact, she quite liked the girl's personality. Chu Ning had a lively personality, and was usually carefree. Sometimes she even gave people the impression that she was careless. However, when it came to serious matters, she would definitely rein in her unruly personality. After spending some time together, Chu Ning had changed from calling Yun Jian's name directly to calling her Yun Jian or Yun Jian intimately. However, it was undeniable that the addition of the word son did indeed make people feel that the relationship between the two of them was much more intimate. Wow! Chu Ning, is this handsome guy your friend too? While Yun Jian and Chu Ning were greeting each other, a girl who came with Chu Ning led the group of people closer to them. The girl stared at Ce in a daze, looking like she was smitten. No, he's from Yun Jian's family. Chu Ning glared at the girl, seemingly unfriendly toward her. The girl was actually Chu Ning's buddy's girlfriend, Xiao Gizi. Chu Ning was quite manly to begin with. Even though she was a girl and looked sweet and lovely on the outside, she was still rather manly. However, Chu Ning had played with a bunch of boys since she was young, and addressed them as her buddies. This group of buddies didn't treat her as a girl either. They usually played together, and were very happy. Chu Ning was also a carefree person. Even though she was a girl, she was the most skilled in martial arts among her group of buddies. That was why Chu Ning caught Gu Yunjian's attention, and was selected to be a candidate for the Advanced Special Forces. Today, Chu Ning was out on the streets with a group of her close friends. As for the other girls present, they were the girlfriends of Chu Ning's buddies. Xiao Gizi was Chu Ning's best buddy's girlfriend. Seeing Xiao Gizi asking about the handsome Ce in front of her buddies, Chu Ning was naturally upset. She felt indignant for her buddy. How could he find such a flirtatious girlfriend? That was why she didn't treat Xiao Gizi nicely. Therefore, when Chu Ning said that Ce belonged to Yun Jian's family, it was a warning to Xiao Gizi that Ce belonged to her friend, and that he was already taken. Oh, Xiao Gizi agreed and stood to the side, but her eyes were still fixed on Ce. Initially, she thought that her current boyfriend was handsome. However, she regretted it when she saw Ce. It turned out that a truly handsome man was not like her current boyfriend. Xiao Gizi's boyfriend, who was also Chu Ning's best friend, was called Meng Xiao. Meng Xiao didn't notice that his girlfriend, Xiao Gizi, was acting differently at this time. On the contrary, Meng Xiao was an enthusiastic person. He invited Yun Jian and Ce enthusiastically. Since everyone knows each other, why don't we walk together? We're on the same side anyway. Once Meng Xiao said that, Chu Ning nodded vigorously and told Yun Jian, "Yeah, Yun Jian. Let's walk together, okay?" Chu Ning even stuck her tongue out and winked at Yun Jian. Yun Jian nodded under Chu Ning's hopeful gaze and smiled before turning to Ce. Why don't you go back first? I'll go out for a walk. Old Madame Sue's words kept replaying in her mind the entire way. Her cheeks were flushed pink, making her look irresistible. This caused her to blush whenever she saw Ce, so she wanted him to go back first. Chapter 234. Hee, since you're Xiaoning's friend, you're my friend too. Just bring your boyfriend along. You don't have to be shy. Meng Xiao looked at Yun Jian and said to Yun Jian with a knowing look. This was because Chu Ning had told Xiao Gizi that Ce belonged to Yun Jian's family. This sentence made Meng Xiao immediately think that Yun Jian and Ce were a couple. After hearing Meng Xiao's words, Yun Jian's rosy cheeks became even redder. However, her facial expression did not change much. He's not my boyfriend, Yun Jian clarified. Ce's smile relaxed a little, but he was not angry. Instead, he looked at everyone with his handsome side profile. He continued Yun Jian's words. Indeed, he's not now, but he'll be soon. Ce's words were very straightforward. It was hard to imagine that someone like him would say such ambiguous words. However, when these words came out of Ce's mouth, it was as simple as asking, "Have you eaten today?" Yun Jian's eyelids twitched violently. She did not expect Ce to really say it out loud. Previously, she had seen Ce's actions towards her, but he had never said anything about it. His words just now really gave her a shock. Yun Jian did not know that Ce had never been in contact with women. Ever since he was young, he had always hated women. Once he fell in love, it would never change for the rest of his life. Moreover, once he found out about his feelings, he would definitely not hide. It was precisely because of this that Ce dared to say it out loud and do it in front of everyone. Chu Ning took a deep breath and was the first to step forward to ease the awkward atmosphere. Alright, let's hurry and go. Before the sun sets, let's take a walk around. Saying that, Chu Ning put an arm around Yun Jian's shoulder and led the way. At this moment Xiao Gizi, who was walking at the back, took a few glances at the tall and handsome Ce who was walking beside Yun Jian, then at her boyfriend Meng Xiao. She suddenly felt that Meng Xiao was even less outstanding. Why? Xiao Gizi dug her fingernails into the flesh of her palms. Why can't I be the first person to meet such a handsome man? In 2 days' time for Yun Jian and the rest to go on a mission, Gu Junjian had specifically instructed that they were not allowed to touch many things when they went on a mission 2 days later. Therefore, Chu Ning dragged Yun Jian around as a way to have some fun before they went on a mission. At this moment, the sky was already dark and the neon lights on the streets were lit up. It's getting dark, and it's quite boring to walk around here. I have a good idea. There's going to be a motorcycle race on the mountain road today. There are some big shots that we don't usually see. I heard that there are a few international motorcycle racers. Do you want to go and take a look? After strolling around the streets, they didn't see anything new. Just as everyone was about to say goodbye and go home, a boy with a righteous face stood up and boasted. Are you serious? Is this news accurate? Immediately another guy chimed in. In fact, other than Chu Ning, the other girls were the girlfriends of Chu Ning's friends. In front of their girlfriends, this group of guys naturally wanted to show their most heroic and knowledgeable side. Chapter 235. I won't be going, Yun Jian told Chu Ning with a smile. Come on, Yun Jian, let's go and have some fun. Chu Ning tugged at the corner of her shirt and winked at Yun Jian, whispering to Yun Jian, We'll be going on a mission in 2 days. Let's use this time to go and have some fun. Yun Jian glanced at Ce beside her before nodding at Chu Ning. She did not want to continue shopping, but once she thought of walking alone with Ce after parting ways with Chu Ning and the rest, her heart skipped a beat. At the same time she felt bitter. Hence, she agreed to go with Chu Ning and the rest. As for Ce, he had no objections. His twinkling eyes were trained on Yun Jian, his handsome face drawing attention. It was undeniable that there were plenty of eyes on Ce along the way. Let's go then. Chu Ning held Yun Jian's hand like they were close friends and strutted ahead. Mountain Winding Road was situated on a mountain not far away. As the name suggested, the mountain was called Mountain Winding, and the road was called Mountain Winding Road for short. At the same time, this road was built halfway up Pan Mountain. Some of Longmen City's rich kids, noble families, and big bosses liked to play exciting games, like racing, motorcycle racing, and so on. Usually, these exciting games were played on this road in Pan Shan. Hence, there was another name for the road, Life and Death Road. Yun Jian and the rest walked there. The night breeze was chilly. Ce stood beside Yun Jian to block the wind for her. It wasn't a long walk from the shopping area to the winding mountain road. By the time Yun Jian and the rest arrived at Mountain Winding Road, some of the spectators were already cheering noisily. Look over there. The righteous guy who suggested for them to watch the motorcycle race shouted excitedly. His name was Situdun. Hearing Situdun's shout, everyone's gaze shifted to the scene. They saw a man in his mid-20s, waving at the crowd with a helmet in his hand. He's the international motorcycle racer Lin Wei. Lin Wei is the pride of Country Z. He's only 25 this year, but he's already the captain of an international motorcycle racing team. Not only is he good at motorcycle racing, he's a top racer too. Situdun pointed at the man who was the center of attention and introduced him to Yun Jian and the rest excitedly. Situdun's words were tinged with pride as he spoke. The way he boasted made it seem as if Lin Wei was himself. It sounds amazing. A girl couldn't help but look over there with admiration when she heard it. When Situdun heard this, he immediately felt proud of himself. The reason he suggested for everyone to come here was to show off that he was knowledgeable. A guy like Situdun did not have any other specialties. His only hobby was to study these things. At this moment, Situdun raised his head like a little swan. Especially in front of Ce, he wanted to show that he was more outstanding. In fact, Situdun had always disliked Ce ever since he came out. He was not like Meng Xiao, that fool, who would really welcome Ce. Ce was more outstanding than all of them combined. When he came, all the girls' attention was on him. Situdun could not wait to show his best side. He wanted to be better than Ce. Situdun did not notice that Yun Jian was squinting her eyes at Lin Wei, who was the center of attention. She was wondering why Lin Wei looked so familiar. Wasn't Lin Wei ranked 4th on the assassin ranking? Lin Wei was also an assassin from the Han organization. Chapter 236. She turned her head and saw Ce pursing his lips slightly. He felt Yun Jian's gaze and turned to face her. His gentle voice made Yun Jian's heart skip a beat. What's wrong? His magnetic and mellow voice was pleasant to the ears. Nothing. Yun Jian was like a student who was caught red-handed by the teacher. She turned her head and faced Ce from the side. Her cheeks flushed red in the next moment. She already knew that Ce was the leader of an Han organization. That meant that Lin Wei was undoubtedly his subordinate. Yun Jian knew Lin Wei as well. The reason why she could recognize Lin Wei at first glance was that when she was slaying God in her past life, Lin Wei was her superior, who trained her in an Han organization. Lin Wei was decisive and ruthless when it came to killing. In her previous life, it was under Lin Wei's training that she developed her abilities. Perhaps others did not know that Lin Wei was just an ordinary person on the surface. He was an international motorcycle racer. However, he was secretly the 4th assassin on the international assassin chart. Perhaps others did not know, but Yun Jian knew very well. There were 4 leaders in an Han organization. The 4 of them were Shuang, Adam, and Mo Senator, and the last person of the 4 was Lin Wei. Lin Wei was also one of the 4 leaders in an Han organization. At the same time, Lin Wei was the most mysterious of the 4 leaders. Even Yun Jian had to investigate for a long time before she found out that Lin Wei was one of the 4 leaders in an Han organization. Yun Jian could not deny that Lin Wei was only ranked 4th on the assassin chart. She was personally trained by Lin Wei. Although she had surpassed Lin Wei in her previous life, she knew Lin Wei's abilities well. This seemingly harmless man was actually ranked 2nd on the assassin chart. At this moment, she finally understood that Lin Wei was Ce's subordinate. It's starting, the motorcycle race is starting. Situdun suddenly pointed at the set excitedly. He interrupted everyone's thoughts and made everyone look at the set. Yun Jian also looked over. only to see that the burly and strong Lin Wei had already put on his helmet and sat on his motorcycle with one foot on the ground. With the referee's gunshot, the motorcycle rushed out like an arrow. The atmosphere at the scene reached its climax. Situ Dun followed the crowd and shouted, "Lin Wei, come on! Lin Wei will win!" His voice was so loud, as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know that he was Lin Wei's fan. The result was naturally indisputable, and Lin Wei won. Yun Jian was not surprised at all by this result. After all, she was taught by Lin Wei, so she naturally knew what Lin Wei was capable of. A long time after Lin Wei reached the finish line, the motorcyclists finally caught up and reached the finish line one after another. "Ah, my motorcycle is out of control. Help!" At this moment, a black motorcycle rushed out from the circular road and rushed into the boiling crowd. For a moment, the crowd screamed and couldn't dodge in time. Some were even knocked to the side and were sent flying. The motorcycle continued to move forward and finally rushed straight towards the crowd where Yun Jian and the others were. Ah! Xiao Gizi was so scared that her face turned pale, and she was the first to scream. Chu Ning's face also turned pale. Although she had been practicing her skills, the motorcycle was very fast, and with the added wind, it was very strong. She didn't have the strength to resist at all. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Just as she was about to make a move, a tall figure flashed past her. By the time everyone turned around, the motorcycle had already been kicked to the ground by the tall figure who had flashed out. All the resistance and inertia of the motorcycle suddenly stopped. When the crowd came to their senses, they were extremely shocked. It was Ce. Yun Jian was taken aback as well. She knew that Ce was good, but she didn't expect him to be so fast. Chapter 237. Hiss! Everyone at the scene sucked in a breath of air. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in fear and shock. Ce put his hands back into his pockets after kicking down the motorcycle that had gone out of control. He walked back to Yun Jian's side as if nothing had happened. Only the motorcycle that was still spinning on the spot, and the driver's cries for help announced that everything that had just happened was real. Situ Dun was the most frightened person at this moment. Situ Dun didn't like Ce. He thought that Ce was just a pretty boy. He didn't expect him to be so powerful. Situ Dun was not only shocked by this. Lin Wei turned his head when he heard the commotion. He was stunned when he saw Ce. Lin Wei strode over to Ce as fast as he could. He lowered his head respectfully and said to Ce, "Young master." An international motorcycle racer bowed his head to Ce. What did this mean? Everyone's eyelids twitched violently at this moment. Especially Situ Dun. One had to know that Situ Dun had bragged in front of everyone just now, because he seemed to know something about Lin Wei. Now Lin Wei had run over to Ce respectfully. Whenever Situ Dun recalled what he had done, he felt as if he had shot himself in the foot with a brick. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Yes. Ce nodded gently at Lin Wei. He glanced at the motorcycle that had gone out of control and said to Lin Wei, "You know how to deal with this?" "Yes," Lin Wei replied. Yun Jian's eyelashes fluttered. Her sharp eyes were also looking at the motorcycle. She also saw the difference. This motorcycle was obviously tampered with. Otherwise, why would it go out of control? Even if it had gone out of control, why would it crash into them alone when there were so many people here? There could not be so many coincidences in the world. It was obvious that someone had done something, and their target was Ce. "Let's go." Yun Jian was still looking at the motorcycle when Ce suddenly turned around and grabbed her hand. His deep eyes stared at Yun Jian as he held her hand and walked back the way they came. "Yun Jian, are you leaving?" Chu Ning saw that Yun Jian was about to leave and immediately called out to her. She was a little afraid of Ce now, so she spoke hesitantly. "She's leaving." Before Yun Jian could reply to Chu Ning, Ce dragged her away. "Then I'll see you 2 days later." Chu Ning swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The thought of Ce's ferocious glare made her a little scared, but she still greeted Yun Jian. "Okay." Yun Jian nodded as she was dragged away by Ce. On the way down the mountain, it was dark all around, and there were no street lights. "Did someone try to assassinate you just now?" Yun Jian asked. She already knew that someone had tried to assassinate him. Yeah, Ce said with a nasal voice. Just as Ce finished speaking, his deep and sharp eyes flashed. Yunjian also realized that something was wrong. Someone was coming. Just as Yunjian narrowed her eyes and was about to make a move, Ce wrapped his arm around her waist and rolled her into a thick bush at the foot of the mountain at lightning speed. Yunjian felt dizzy. Then, she saw Ce's enlarged handsome face above her. If there was anyone here, they would definitely be able to see the two of them hiding amidst the thick and tall grass in an ambiguous position. Yunjian was about to push Ce away when she heard a flurry of footsteps. She immediately stopped moving. Someone was coming. Of course, it was the group of people who wanted to assassinate Ce. If it weren't for Yunjian and Ce's sensitive ears, they wouldn't have been able to hear the sound. Ce was on top of Yunjian. His breathing gradually quickened. The milky scent of a young girl wafted into his nose. Yunjian's rosy lips were right in front of him. It was as tempting as a delicious pastry. At this moment, the footsteps were getting closer. Chapter 238. Yunjian's soft lips were kissed all of a sudden. Her eyes widened as she stared at Ce's enlarged face. Shock. Surprise. Horror. She had lived for 16 to 17 years in her previous life and this life, but she had never been so intimate with a man. Not to mention kissing, she had never even held a man's hand. She had never even held his hand. Ce had actually kissed her. Furthermore, the group of people who wanted to assassinate Ce were still nearby. Of course, it was because the group of people who wanted to assassinate Ce was still nearby that Yunjian didn't make a sound. Otherwise, she would have pushed Ce away immediately. The price she had to pay for not making a sound was Ce's crazy kisses. Ce had never kissed a woman before. This was his first time kissing a woman, and it was also the first time he had the urge to lock the young lady in front of him tightly under his body. The group of people who wanted to assassinate Ce came closer and closer, but Yunjian didn't move at all. Ce controlled his strength. He kissed Yunjian's lips gently, but didn't make a sound that the group of people could hear. Yunjian's cheeks flushed red. She was holding back her breath from Ce's kiss. But that wasn't the worst part. Yunjian suddenly felt a warmth in her chest. He even put his hand on her chest. He even pinched it. Yunjian's beautiful eyes widened, and she reached out to push Ce away. Ce was caught off guard, and was pushed away by Yunjian. At this moment, the group of people who wanted to assassinate Ce had already left. In her previous life, Yunjian was a secret agent, so she had naturally learned how to seduce people. Some secret agents would even use their bodies to seduce men, and only kill them at the last moment. Of course, Yunjian had never tried this before. Ever since she had debuted, no one was her match. In other words, she was so powerful that she didn't need to resort to such despicable tricks. It was precisely because she had learned this that Yunjian understood that those female agents used the moment when a man was at his lowest to kill him. It was obvious that Ce had really fallen for him, which was why he was pushed away by Yunjian. Yunjian wiped her red lips, stood up and walked forward. Seeing that Yunjian was angry, Ce quickly grabbed Yunjian's wrist and explained, "I didn't do it on purpose." He really didn't do it on purpose. Cough. Touch her breasts. It was just that she was too alluring, and he couldn't control himself. Go away. Yunjian glared at Ce, and flung her hands a few times only to realize that she could not shake off his grip. Yunjian's heart pounded even more violently. It was as if her heart would leap out of her body in the next second. She wanted to cover her heartbeat, but she could only feel it beating rapidly. I didn't do it on purpose. Ce repeated this sentence again. His beautiful eyes had a glimmer of light. He was supposed to be extremely arrogant, but he was willing to lower himself for her sake. His tone even sounded like he was begging for forgiveness. Yunjian pursed her lips. She suddenly recalled the moment when his lips were on hers. Suddenly, she felt her cheeks burning up. I'm going back. Yunjian didn't want to argue with him anymore. Okay. Ce revealed a handsome smile. Then, he looked at her with a gentle gaze. He held Yunjian's hand and walked down the mountain. Yunjian didn't resist. This was the first time she felt powerless. Her resistance was nothing in front of CE. She was the #1 secret agent on the international secret agent ranking, the strongest boss of the kosher mercenaries. Chapter 239. By the time Yunjian and CE returned to the villa, Dong Wan and Qin Yiru had already gone home. Dong Wan and Qin Yiru were currently sitting in the living room, facing a television, as they enjoyed snacks while watching a drama. Dong Wan came from a wealthy family, so it was not surprising that she could afford a television in this era. Qin Yiru, on the other hand, was obviously planning to relax for the day, as she and Dong Wan watched the drama on the television together in a lively atmosphere. Qin Yiru did not notice anything when she saw Yunjian and CE coming back from the front door. She merely asked, "Xiao Jian, you're back. Do you want to come and watch some TV together?" Dong Wan saw Yunjian and CE coming in one after another, and Yunjian's cheeks blushing for some reason. She knew that her nephew must have done something terrible. In spite of it, Dong Wan pretended that she did not see anything and greeted Yunjian and CE like how Qin Yiru did. "Mom, I'm tired from shopping today. I'll go to bed first," Yunjian said. "Okay, Xiao Jian, go upstairs and rest if you're tired," Qin Yiru said. Yunjian nodded and went upstairs. "Auntie, I'll go back to my room too." CE went upstairs with Yunjian with a dark expression. "The kids aren't feeling well, are they?" Qin Yiru watched CE go upstairs worriedly and wanted to stand up to ask about it. "I already said that they are still children. We adults should mind our own business. Besides, they're all grown up, they should know better. Of course, they'll tell us if they're feeling unwell." Dong Wan stopped Qin Yiru and said with a smile. Qin Yiru was relieved to hear that and calmed down to continue watching the television. Second floor. As soon as Yunjian went upstairs, CE followed closely behind. However, he didn't do anything to her. Instead, he looked at her petite back and said, "Good night." When Yunjian heard CE's voice, she was stunned for a moment before she strode back to her room. 2 days later, because it was school day, classes were still going on as usual. Gu Junjian had already applied for leave for Yunjian in advance. CE was not in Longmen City these days. After all, as the leader of Anhun, he naturally had many things to do. It was just that in order to spend more time with Yunjian, CE had put aside his work to come stay in Longmen City during the weekends when Yunjian was not staying in the dormitory. By the time they arrived at the military training camp, the other 6 had already arrived. Yunjian returned to the team. After the 7 of them reported their numbers, Gu Junjian told them in a serious tone, "I've said before that the mission this time is very difficult, but I believe that you can complete it successfully. Now, each of you go to the armory and pick a weapon that suits you and gather here. Remember, you can only pick one weapon." Gu Junjian stood where he was with his hands behind his back after he finished speaking. The 7 of them went to the armory at once. The armory here was actually a place to store hidden weapons. The weapons room here was equipped with all kinds of weapons. Once they entered the armory, Chu Xiangnan could not help exclaiming, "Wow, wow, wow, there are so many weapons. So cool. Hurry up and pick a weapon that suits you and gather outside." Lu Shiyan was much calmer as he picked up a pistol and walked out. "Yunjian, what weapon do you plan to pick?" Chu Ning looked at the weapons excitedly and asked Yunjian hesitantly. "This." Yunjian turned her hand and smirked, her chosen weapon already in her palm. It was a butterfly knife. Chapter 240. She's indeed an ignorant fool. This kind of weapon can be bought anywhere. What's the use of it? Jiang Weiwei was very upset that Yunjian had taken the first place in the cross-country race. She could not help but laugh when she saw that Yunjian was only holding a butterfly knife. "What does it have to do with you what kind of weapon my Yunjian is using? Jiang Weiwei, you should mind your own business." Chu Ning was the first to speak up for Yunjian when she heard that. Jiang Weiwei's eyes turned fierce. She had looked down on them from the beginning, especially the newcomer Yunjian. However, This newcomer whom she looked down on actually surpassed her in the cross-country race last time. But so what? She was good at running, but that did not mean that she was good at everything else. Moreover, Jiang Weiwei was born into a military family. She had been training since she was young. Perhaps she had lost to Yun Jian in running. However, that was not necessarily the case in other aspects. It was undeniable that Jiang Weiwei was a competitive person. Chu Ning and Jiang Weiwei looked at each other and did not say anything else. Both of them ignored each other. Yun Jian did not hold it against Jiang Weiwei either. Soon, the group of people chose their weapons and left the armory. Of course, other than Yun Jian, the rest of them chose firearms and other weapons. Most of them chose handguns. Gu Junjian stood outside and watched as the few of them returned to the team after choosing their weapons. He glanced at the weapons in their hands and paused when he saw the butterfly knife in Yun Jian's hand. Other than Yun Jian, the rest of them chose handguns or other weapons with high damage. Yun Jian was the only one who could wield a weapon like the butterfly knife that required one's ability to wield it. Reporting, we have chosen our weapons. As the team leader, Lu Shiyan did a head count and reported to Gu Junjian. Okay. Gu Junjian nodded. Then he began to announce the mission Yun Jian and the rest were about to carry out. Your mission location is in Country X's H province. There are 2 underworld forces in Country X, and they will soon conduct an arms trade. And your goal this time is to seize the arms. Remember, even if you can't take the firearms away, you have to make sure they don't complete the deal. As for the time and place where these 2 forces traded arms, we only have a rough idea. You'll have to go to Country X and investigate it in detail. Later, I will send a car to send you to Country X's H province. Remember, during the mission you can only use code names. At this point, Gu Yunjian's tone was absolutely solemn. Also, Country X is an economically backward country. In Country X, the security is not as good as in Country Z. Especially for the underground forces, murder and arson are common. So be careful. Under the tense and solemn atmosphere of Gu Junjian, everyone felt their hearts tighten. Yes, the group of people responded. Then get ready to set off immediately. Gu Junjian said. Country X was actually quite far from Country Z, but it was not separated by the sea. Therefore, as long as they passed the border, they could reach there by car. Gu Junjian sent someone to send them to Country X. The car drove for about a day and a night before they arrived. The person who sent Yun Jian and the rest overtook Yun Jian and the rest to H province and left. Lu Shiyan and the rest took some Country X currency that Gu Junjian gave them, and they quickly checked into a hotel. Country X's economic development was very backward, and this could be seen from the structure of the houses. Chapter 241. It was nighttime, and the sky was completely dark. Yun Jian's group of 7 sat around a round low table that was so old that it looked like it would fall with a push. Captain Lu Shiyan was holding a few sets of information. He distributed them to everyone and scanned them. This set of information is the scope of our target this time, Lu Shiyan said. The rest of them immediately took the information and scanned through it. Yun Jian only took a few glances at the piece of paper. These 2 underworld forces were the overlords of Country X. This time, the arms trade between the 2 forces could be considered an especially important matter in Country X. These 2 underworld forces were called the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang. These 2 gangs were one gang. Country X did not have a large population, but these 2 gangs had about 1,000 people. As for the time and location of the other arms deals, even Gu Junjian had no way of finding out. If they wanted to disrupt the arms deal between these 2 gangs, they had to know the time and location of the deal. If they wanted to know the time and location of the deal, Yun Jian's group of 7 had to investigate it themselves. Therefore, this mission was not suitable for the advanced special forces soldiers, who often showed up. That was why Gu Junjian had said that they could not let the enemy suspect them at all during this period of time. If they wanted to understand this, they had to infiltrate the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang to investigate the situation. If they were caught and their identities were exposed, then the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang would be able to wantonly kill people in Country X. They would not be able to leave Country X alive. This was a matter of life and death. So it was not a small matter. Captain Lu Shuryan frowned and pondered for a long time before he suggested, "Since we don't know the exact time and location of the arms deal between the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang, we have to find out in the shortest time possible. Captain, I suggest we go to the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang tonight to find out more," Feng Xiaoran suggested. I think so too." Lu Shuryan nodded at Feng Xiaoran, then he pondered. "Then who should we send? Naturally Azura and I will go. Both of us are the fastest runners. Even if we are detected by the enemy, we can retreat in time." Jiang Weiwei glanced at Yun Jian. She had already started using code names to address each other. Not only was Jiang Weiwei displeased with Yun Jian, but she was also displeased with everyone else present other than herself. But it was one thing to be unhappy with someone. She would also play some tricks on the person she was unhappy with. If there was one thing about Jiang Weiwei that people did not dislike, it would probably be that when it came to a critical moment, no matter how unhappy she was with someone, she would put away her feelings and complete the mission together with them first before taking revenge for her personal grudge. Lu Shuryan was silent for a while before nodding. "Okay." Then Lu Shuryan turned to look at Yun Jian. "You don't have any objections, right?" "I have no objections." Yun Jian grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth, and agreed. "Now," Yun Jian asked Lu Shuryan. "That's right. You guys get ready." Lu Shuryan stood up. His handsome face revealed a trace of seriousness. "I don't need to prepare." Yun Jian smiled. She walked to her backpack, unzipped it, and took out a black bandage. Then she deftly placed the only weapon she had, the butterfly knife, on her waist and tied it tightly with the black bandage. After doing this, she lifted the corner of her shirt and stood up. She could hide a weapon like this? Everyone was stunned and dumbfounded, especially Jiang Weiwei. She was still holding the shiny pistol in her hand, and was still deciding if she should bring it out with her. The pistol was big and difficult to hide. Even if it was hidden on the body, it would be easily discovered. The butterfly knife, however, was different. If she tied it to her waist like how she was doing, unless someone lifted the corner of her shirt, no one would realize that she was hiding a knife at her waist. Chapter 242. Jiang Weiwei was the most embarrassed person in the group. She had previously mocked Yun Jian for choosing the butterfly knife as a weapon, but now that she thought about it, wasn't she the laughable one? Jiang Weiwei paused for a moment before tossing the pistol in her hand onto the table. Then, she took out a small Swiss Army knife from her backpack and stuffed it into her pocket. Pistols were very conspicuous. Naturally, they couldn't carry pistols, but they could carry knives. Moreover, they were only going to check out the situation tonight, not start the operation. "Let's go." Yun Jian's eyes moved. She swayed her long hair that was tied up tightly and led the way out. Naturally, she was talking to Jiang Weiwei. Perhaps Yun Jian didn't really appreciate Jiang Weiwei, but since it was a mission, as long as Jiang Weiwei didn't do anything excessive, she wouldn't mind. Jiang Weiwei didn't respond to Yun Jian's words, but she followed her out. After Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei left the room, Lu Shuryan and the others didn't stay idle. "We'll split into groups and ask the residents about the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang. We'll gather back here in an hour," Lu Shuryan said to the other members. Thus, the group of people quickly dispersed. Some people in Country X's province also spoke Mandarin. Only a small number of people were influenced by other languages. Therefore, there was no language barrier. Yun Jian's figure dashed through the night. Her long hair fluttered as she ran in the dark night sky, drawing a beautiful arc. Behind her, Jiang Weiwei ran with all her might and barely caught up to her. One had to admit that Jiang Weiwei was pretty good. If it was someone else, they would have been left behind by Yun Jian. In that document, the locations of the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang were also listed. However, there was no more detailed information. It was up to them to investigate all of this. Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei decided to check out the Flying Sky Gang. This was because the Flying Sky Gang was more powerful than the Iron Lock Gang. The Flying Sky Gang's base was on the busiest street in H province. In Country X, a province was about the size of a city in Country Z. There was a 5-story modern building at the end of the street. It was the most outstanding building in the circle of dilapidated houses. This was the headquarters of the Flying Heavens Gang. At the entrance of the building, there were 2 men guarding the door. One of the 2 gatekeepers was tall, and the other was short. At this moment, they were watching the crowd at the entrance. This building was the headquarters of the Flying Sky Gang. At the same time, as long as one entered the building, they would see that the lobby on the first and second floors was a high-class casino. How are we going to get in? Jiang Weiwei would ask for Yun Jian's opinion at the critical moment. Now that they were a team, even if Jiang Weiwei didn't like Yun Jian, she wouldn't act alone. What do you think? Yun Jian glanced at Jiang Weiwei. Break in. Jiang Weiwei pressed her hand on the pocket of her Swiss Army knife and said with a sharp look in her eyes, blend in. Yun Jian glanced at her. With that, she messed up her hair and tore her clothes until they were slightly tattered. She even smeared mud on her clothes and fair cheeks. Then, she walked out of the darkness and walked towards the entrance of the building. Jiang Weiwei was stunned. She didn't know what was going on, but she still followed after Yun Jian and dirted her clothes and face. Who are you? The tall gatekeeper stopped Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei in front of the brightly lit casino. Uncle, we're here to look for our father. He took the last bit of our family's savings to gamble here. We've been hungry for 2 days. We're really hungry. Mom is sick too. We don't have anything to eat, so we can only look for our father. Uncle, can you let us in to look for our father? Chapter 243. It had to be said that Yun Jian's acting skills were superb. As a secret agent in her previous life, she had been specially trained. Not only did secret agents need the ability to kill in one move, but more importantly, they needed to know how to blend into the crowd and in the other party's life in one move when their guard was down and they were suspicious. Obviously, this was Yun Jian's forte. And now, she was planning to blend in here. Perhaps it was because Yun Jian's accent was exactly the same as the locals in Country X's H province, coupled with her pitiful appearance and her tattered clothes. Also, Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei were thin and weak to begin with. They really looked like they had been starving for a long time and came from poor families. Therefore, the tall man's heart softened. He and the short man discussed for a while and let Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei enter. Jiang Weiwei only realized after entering the door that Yun Jian's acting skills were superb. Moreover, they would not be suspected if they entered the door like this. Yun Jian only curled her lips slightly. She and Jiang Weiwei entered the door, turned the corner, and left the sight of the 2 men at the door. Then, they walked straight to a nearby washroom. Fortunately, there was no one in the corridor. Yun Jian quickly entered the washroom with Jiang Weiwei. Yun Jian washed the mud off her face quickly and tied her hair tie again. Jiang Weiwei followed suit. Yun Jian tidied up her clothes and tried to wipe the mud off her clothes with water. Then she rearranged her clothes. At this moment, Yun Jian seemed to have changed into a different person. It was as if the pitiful little girl just now was just an illusion. The torn hem of the dress looked fashionable on Yun Jian in an instant. Even if there were some holes, they still had a natural beauty. Jiang Weiwei was dumbfounded. She could do this. However, she saw that Yun Jian had already walked to the casino on the 2nd floor. Jiang Weiwei quickly patted the mud off her body and followed her. On the 2nd floor of the casino, groups of gamblers were crowding around the gambling tables, shouting and yelling. The atmosphere was extremely majestic. No one noticed the arrival of Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei at all. Of course, it was not like no one noticed Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei. Yun Jian's looks were simply too outstanding. Even without any makeup, her skin still looked shiny and as delicate as a newborn baby's. Hey beautiful, are you alone? A handsome man with short hair walked over and struck up a conversation with Yun Jian. No, I'm with my friend. Yun Jian smiled generously and pointed at Jiang Weiwei. She was still thinking about how to blend in without leaving a trace, But she didn't expect someone to strike up a conversation with her. This was just as well. The man looked at Yunjian awkwardly. He was a little sorry that he didn't see Jiang Weiwei just now. Then he reached out his hand and introduced himself to Yunjian. My name is Miran. You can call me Xiaoli. She's Xiao Shui. Yunjian didn't reach out to shake his hand. Instead, she made up a name. When she lied, she introduced herself to Miran without blushing or skipping a beat. Oh, nice to meet you. Miran didn't embarrassedly return his hand. He bent 45 degrees to the side and bowed to Yunjian and Jiang Weiwei, like a gentleman to show his friendliness. So, what game do you two beauties want to play at the casino? After Miran finished speaking, he sized up Yunjian again. His eyes filled with indescribable nakedness. As expected, he wasn't a good person. However, Yunjian pretended not to notice anything. She blinked and asked innocently, what game? Miran was one of the people in charge of the casino. When he heard Yunjian's words, he became even more excited. His gaze seemed to be able to see through Yunjian. However, in his heart he thought, it's been a long time since he played with such a pure student. Chapter 244. Can I make any conditions if I win? Yunjian blinked. Her innocent smile made Miran's heart itch. Jiang Weiwei stood by the side without saying a word. At this moment, she also knew that if she were to face such a scene, she would probably be exposed as soon as she spoke. And Yunjian was actually able to disguise herself to this extent. Even Jiang Weiwei, who didn't have a good impression of Yunjian at the beginning, had to admit that even if she were to believe that Yunjian was an agent of a country trained by a special agent unit, she would believe it. Therefore, Jiang Weiwei didn't say anything. Their mission was to seize that batch of firearms. Right now they were still on a mission, and Jiang Weiwei was with Yunjian. Therefore, no matter how much she hated Yunjian, she wouldn't trip her up. At this juncture, if Yunjian was really exposed, Jiang Weiwei intended to help her. Of course, I'm a man. I never lie. Miran patted his chest and promised. He softened his voice and continued to seduce Yunjian. Especially a cute girl like you. How could I bear to lie to you? These rather ambiguous words made Yunjian roll her eyes in her heart. Even Jiang Weiwei felt that Miran was disgusting. However, neither of them showed their emotions on their faces. But, I don't know how to play this. What should I do? Yunjian glanced at the gambling crowd and said. Miran was confused by Yunjian. He really thought that Yunjian had never gambled before. This was what he meant. Miran chuckled and tried even harder to trick Yunjian. It's okay, I'll teach you. Besides, if you lose, I won't ask for anything too excessive. Of course, it wasn't an excessive request. Miran had already made a plan in his heart. He wanted Yunjian to lose. Then he would lure her step by step and trick her into bed. This was his real goal. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to charm such an innocent student. Of course, if Miran knew that Yunjian was not only the #1 secret agent slaying God in her previous life, but she had never met a match in the gambling circle. She was the lady gambler, who was respectfully called the god of gamblers in this circle. Yet she pretended to be a student who did not know how to gamble in front of him. Miran would probably be so angry that he would vomit blood. Yunjian was indeed known as the goddess of gamblers in her previous life. Back then, Yunjian had gambled wildly for an entire night at the internationally renowned Fengyun Casino. She had won a whole month's worth of profits from the Fengyun Casino, a total of $1 billion USD. In the end, Fengyun Casino had no choice but to beg her, the great Buddha, to leave. Okay. Yunjian pretended to be in a difficult position and nodded. Seeing that Yunjian had agreed, Miran became even more excited. At the same time, from Yunjian's expression, he was even more convinced that Yunjian was gambling for the first time. In that case, was there any suspense to the outcome of this gamble? Of course he would win. Come. Let's play over there. Miran led Yunjian to a gambling table. He kicked away the gamblers who were still around the table and politely invited Yunjian to take a seat. Since it's your first time playing, little sister Xiaoli, let's play a round of dice. As Miran spoke, he picked up 3 dice and placed them in front of Yunjian. At the same time, he covered the 3 dice with a bowl. Chapter 245. Even the way he addressed Yun Jian began to become a little ambiguous. It could be seen that Mirren was probably an expert in coaxing little girls. Yun Jian smiled contemptuously, but the expression she showed in front of Mirren was an innocent and cute little face. At this moment, even Jiang Weiwei couldn't help but twitch in her heart. Fortunately, Mirren didn't notice her. Otherwise, with her performance, she would have been seen through long ago. Just shake the bowl like this. Yun Jian continued to act like a novice who didn't know anything. Yes, the 3 dice are in the bowl. Shake it however you want, and then we'll guess the size of the dice. Mirren narrowed his eyes. He really thought that Yun Jian didn't know how to play, so he patiently explained. The dice had 6 faces, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on each of the 6 faces. The 3 dice were shaken under the lid of the bowl. After shaking the bowl, they opened the bowl to see the size of the 3 dice. The gamblers would announce the size of the dice before the dice began to roll. This was a form of gambling in the gambling arena, gambling dice. Mi Luan explained to Yun Jian patiently, glancing at her from the corner of his eyes as he asked with a mischievous smirk. Shaoli, do you get it now that I've explained it this way? Understood. Yun Jian pretended to be enlightened and nodded at Mirren. Then let's begin. Mirren narrowed his eyes and spoke in a wretched tone. Little sister Shaoli, do you want to bet big or small? I bet big. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. Since Mirren wanted to give her a round, why should she reject his good intentions? Bet big. Little sister Shaoli, are you sure? If you bet big, you will lose. Are you sure you want to bet big? Mirren said loudly. At the same time, she glanced to the side and said to Yun Jian, I'm sure. Yun Jian also narrowed her eyes. At the same time, she reached out and covered the bowl with the 3 dice. Mirren had done something. In fact, Mirren had installed a regulator inside the bowl. The 3 dice were covered in the bowl, and the size of the dice could be controlled. In other words, if Yun Jian bet big, the die in the bowl would become small. If Yun Jian bet small, the die in the bowl would become big. No matter what, she couldn't win. And the person who controlled the regulator in the bowl was nearby. Coincidentally, Yun Jian caught Mi Luan's glance just now. Following Mirren's gaze, she saw a man holding a square remote control beside an inconspicuous washroom in the distance. The man was holding a remote control that could adjust the size of the dice in the bowl in front of her. Mirren had just asked Yun Jian loudly if she was betting big. She was probably conveying to the man holding the remote control in the distance that she, Yun Jian, was going to bet big. Therefore, she asked the man to control the dice in the bowl to be small. The casino was messy, and there were all kinds of people, but the people who opened the casino would definitely ensure their profits. Therefore, many casinos would cheat to win. Mirren probably wanted to use this move to defeat her, but she didn't expect to be seen through by Yun Jian. Little sister Shaoli, start shaking. Mirren made a gesture of invitation and said to Yun Jian, Wait. Yun Jian suddenly shouted to stop. She revealed an embarrassed expression and pretended to be embarrassed. I'm in a hurry. I want to go to the toilet before I come back. All right. Little sister Shaoli, you can go. There's no rush, haha. Mirren didn't notice anything different. He spoke generously. Chapter 246. Yun Jian got up and gave Jiang Weiwei a subtle look before walking towards the washroom. Although Jiang Weiwei was surprised, she wasn't a fool. Other than her competitive nature, she was also very smart. She was considered a powerful character among the candidates for the special forces. These were all true. Jiang Weiwei quickly understood, but she didn't show any other expression as she was facing Mirren. Yun Jian walked past Jiang Weiwei without a trace and headed towards the washroom. After a while, she walked out of the washroom again. It was as if nothing had happened. However, at this moment, the remote control in the hands of the man standing next to the washroom suddenly failed. No one noticed that the moment Yun Jian walked over, the remote control in the man's hands was instantly scrapped. Yun Jian returned to the opposite side of Miran and sat down. She shook her wet little hands that had just been washed. Her fair and clean little face looked lovely and lovely. Miran swallowed his saliva. The desire in his body was boiling. "Little sister Shaoli, can we begin?" Miran couldn't help but urge. "Okay." Yun Jian took out a tissue and wiped her tender little hands like a little girl. She smiled at Miran. Then she reached out and touched the bowl. The 3 dice in the bowl were like a few small balls, making ping 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 sounds in the bowl. Yun Jian shook her hands twice and stopped. She smiled at Miran, only to see that he couldn't wait to lift the lid of the bowl. He couldn't wait to see Yun Jian lose to him. At the same time, he could logically make his not excessive request. Thinking up to here, Miran's mouth was still speaking with a hint of an evil smile. "Little sister Shaoli, actually, there is a trick to playing this kind of dice. However, this is your first time playing, so even if you lose, it's normal. I can understand." After the last word fell, Miran had already opened the bowl with a smile. The 3 dice in the bowl also appeared in front of everyone's eyes. 5, 5, 6. Big. It was actually big. Did this mean that Yun Jian had won? Miran stayed in the act of lifting the bowl for a long time, stunned. "I won. Shouldn't you agree to my request and let me make a condition?" Yun Jian blinked. She smiled shyly and continued. "You promised me." Jiang Weiwei was dumbfounded. She looked at the scene in front of her in disbelief. Who would have thought that Yun Jian would actually win? She even gambled. Miran's face instantly darkened, and his face darkened. No one knew what this represented. He had installed a regulator in the bowl, so it was impossible for him to lose. The only possibility was, could it be this little sister Shaoli in front of him? She had seen through it long ago. Miran was not stupid. He was able to sit in the position of one of the people in charge of the Flying Sky Gang casino. Not only did he rely on brute force, but more importantly, he had to have a brain. He suddenly remembered Yun Jian's action of going to the washroom just now. Miran's expression did not change. He stood up fiercely and slammed the table. Then, he glared at Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei. His expression suddenly changed. He flipped the gambling table over and shouted in all directions, "Arrest the 2 of them!" Seeing Miran's sudden change in expression, Yun Jian was not in a hurry. She had just been testing Miran. If Miran was stupid, then she would naturally be able to find out about the firearms. Unfortunately, Miran was not stupid. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She watched as the gamblers around the casino ran away in fear. A group of people with guns rushed out from the back of the casino. Her expression did not change. Jiang Weiwei's face turned pale. The underworld here was not like the underworld in Country Z. Chapter 247. A group of Flying Sky Gang brothers with pistols surrounded Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei with Miran as the center. One by one, they pointed their pistols at Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei. Even Jiang Weiwei, who came from a military family and swore not to be afraid of sacrifice since she was young, couldn't help but shiver in the face of these pistols. Miran, who was standing at the front, stopped pretending. He smiled at Yun Jian and snorted. "My little sister Shaoli, stop pretending. Ha! I originally wanted to play with you because you were beautiful, but since you came with ill intentions, don't blame us for being impolite." Miran had already listened to the teachings of the Flying Sky Gang's boss. Before the recent arms trade between the Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang, anyone who was suspicious had to be cautious when coming into contact with them. That was why when Miran realized that something was wrong, he didn't say anything. He waited until he was sure before making a move. It turned out that Miran was already on guard. Yun Jian's lips curled slightly. Jiang Weiwei stood back to back with Yun Jian. Compared to Yun Jian, Jiang Weiwei never thought that they would be exposed. This seemingly obsessed Miran was actually not as simple as she seemed on the surface. As expected, it was not easy to deceive. But the most despicable thing was that they only had knives in their hands, while the other party had so many people, and everyone was holding pistols. Jiang Weiwei finally knew why Gu Yunjian's tone was heavy when he asked them to complete the mission. However, Jiang Weiwei, was also a person who could bend and stretch. She never regretted the choice she had made. At critical moments, she would still throw all personal grudges to the back of her mind. Jiang Weiwei leaned against Yun Jian's back and asked Yun Jian in a low voice, "What should we do?" "Listen to my instructions." Yun Jian also replied to her in a low voice. The interaction between Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei was not seen by Miran and the others. Miran, on the other hand, laughed heartily. One of Miran's subordinates suggested, "Lord Miran, these two women are probably undercover police agents, right? You don't even look at yourself. How dare you behave atrociously in our Flying Sky Gang? Why don't we teach them a lesson? We'll F***ck them right here, so that we can have some fun too. What do you think?" Ha ha ha. This was a casino, surrounded by gamblers who did not dare to escape. The dirty words of Miran's subordinate made a group of Miran's other brothers feel restless. Making love with these two women in public, it was probably going to be a different experience. "You dare? Aren't you afraid that our people will avenge us?" Although Jiang Weiwei was a woman who knew when to bow and submit, she would rather commit suicide than be humiliated to death. Thus she clenched her teeth and said hatefully. Before Miran could speak, his subordinates began to mock Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei on his behalf. "Why wouldn't I dare? TSK, do you really think our Flying Sky Gang is an ordinary gang? Do you think I'm afraid of your people?" Miran's subordinate continued to brag, and then he exaggeratedly used an example to show off the power of his Flying Sky Gang. "Do you know Slaying God, the top secret agent on the International Secret Agent ranking? Look at how young you two are. I'm sure you don't know. Let me tell you, even the younger brother of Slaying God, who was known as the strongest secret agent in the secret agent world, was arrested, and Slaying God went missing because of this incident. Our Flying Sky Gang was involved. Don't you think our Flying Sky Gang is powerful? Even a big shot like that was fooled by us." The more this person boasted, the more enthusiastic he became. He looked as if he was afraid that others would not know that he was from the Flying Sky Gang. However, this person did not know the actual facts. He only heard that Slaying God went missing because of this incident, and the Flying Sky Gang was also involved in the incident, so he could not help but exaggerate a little. What no one expected, however, was that Yun Jian's face darkened when she heard the man's words. Chapter 248. Jiang Weiwei stood close to Yun Jian's back. She could feel Yun Jian's body trembling when she heard Miran's subordinates boast. Outsiders did not know that the one thing that Yun Jian regretted the most in her previous life was not looking after her younger brother well. She swore that she would investigate her younger brother's death. It was not that she did not investigate after her rebirth. However, it was as if the incident had been purposely erased. She had been investigating for so long but to no avail. Today, she heard about it from a subordinate of the Flying Apsara Gang. The Flying Apsara Gang was involved in her younger brother's death. Yun Jian was thoroughly enraged. "What did I say? Pfft. Don't you understand what I'm saying, little girl? Haha. I'm saying that the Flying Apsara Gang was involved in the murder of the younger brother of the International #1 agent, Slaying God. That kind of character is not something that you and I can imagine. Why isn't this enough to show how strong the Flying Apsara Gang is?" The last word strong was stuck in his throat. Before Miran's subordinate could finish a string of words, he fell to the ground with a puff and died with a kick of his legs. Everyone was shocked by the turn of events. There was a blade stuck in the neck of the dead man, who suddenly fell to the ground. The blade was 3 inches into the neck, and the force was enough to kill someone on the spot. For someone to be able to exert such strength, other than an assassin, it would be a special agent. The group looked in the direction where the flying dagger came from, and saw Yun Jian playing with the flying dagger that came out of nowhere. Murder. Her blade can kill people. At that moment, a gambler lost control and exclaimed. There was a hint of horror in his words and his fear of Yun Jian. Miran and the rest were scared out of their wits by Yun Jian's action. No one saw how Yun Jian attacked earlier, but she had already killed someone. "Kill her. Shoot them." Miran pointed at Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei and yelled at his subordinates. At this moment, how could Mirren still want to play with Yun Jian and Jiang Weiwei? She was someone who could kill someone right in front of everyone's eyes without letting anyone see how she did it. How terrifying was it? However, before Mirren could react, Yun Jian had already moved. Her figure quickly shuttled between Mirren's group of men, who were still loading their guns. Wherever Yun Jian passed, people would fall to the ground and die. Until later, Mirren's subordinates all died miserably. All of them had one thing in common. Their throats had been slit. Yun Jian held the butterfly knife that she had taken out from her waist at some unknown time. A drop of blood dripped from the tip of the knife as she walked towards Mirren. So what if you have guns? You guys who don't know how to use guns are still a bunch of trash. Yun Jian shouted. At the same time, under the horrified gazes of the group of gamblers, Jiang Weiwei and Mirren, she stepped on a pistol that had fallen to the ground closest to her. With a stomp, the gun flew off the ground and was firmly grasped by Yun Jian. Let me teach you how to use a gun. Yun Jian looked at Mirren and said faintly. Then she pulled the wrench and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet flew into Mirren's thigh. Mirren screamed and fell to her knees uncontrollably. You! What do you want? What do you want? Do you want the time and address of my Flying Sky Gang and the Iron Lock Gang? I'll tell you everything. As long as you let me go. Mirren endured the pain and said hurriedly. Heh. Yun Jian sneered and revealed a strange smile. Too late. I've changed my mind. Your Flying Sky Gang will become a member of history. After that, the sound of a bullet piercing through flesh was heard. Mirren's eyes widened as she fell back. Jiang Weiwei looked at the scene in front of her and was stunned on the spot. She did not expect Yun Jian to be so powerful. They were facing a group of armed underworld forces. She even killed all of them. More importantly, Jiang Weiwei considered one thing. Yun Jian's expression changed when Mirren's subordinates mentioned Slaying God, the top secret agent ranking. Yun Jian's current code name was Slaying God. Slaying God and Slaying God were pronounced the same. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.